water though.
I have to go get this.
There's only one place. She's doing good. Doing good. I guess I don't have to. We'll make sure he gets everything to be. Yeah, absolutely. You haven't been here. The only time I've been here, I've been here 2 times since here, but I hadn't been here until they had a press conference that day, you know. He's been really tied up today with those constituents out there that had a little problem, and about 20 minutes after that, I told him someone said that next couple of weeks, so that's going to I think when I asked hey, how you doing?
I asked him about it months ago. Oh, you may need it.
Because there is something that they can how that plays, but that's how the content.
And I got your leg and didn't get
We do better.
Hi, good. How are you tonight? See you all here again.
Is that right? That's where they got the low trade.
Hello.
Hey, Robert, where are you going to? Good evening.
Yeah,
How you doing?
That's like
Hey, you got a business card.
It's the only one there. It's like at 10 a.m. in the morning, you know.
Don't make a trip. Don't make a trip. No, no, no. Don't worry.
They're probably out.
We don't know what. I was downstairs. Are they?
That should be brought back.
Well, I'm trying to order the chairmanship next year, but I'll still keep the art department. I'm just not going to be trying to do it. Yeah, I'll still have the art
So what is this thing with the Canton?
Folk art.
Picks them up.
I know. Glad you enjoyed it.
This is on the way to my
I think that's what it says.
I get my purse out of the seat. I didn't realize he said I felt bad. So I was putting you in the secretary. I wasn't here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the first thing that we need to do tonight, very briefly, is to have a public hearing for the city's Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan. So at this time, I will call that public hearing, we'll open the public hearing, and I'd ask Mr. Patton if he they want to help with that, if there's any questions or maybe you want to give a brief analysis of it, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. All local governments are required to prepare an Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan. A committee of staff members has been working diligently to prepare this. We have to do a self-evaluation assessment of all the policies, programs, facilities of the city, and identify barriers. We are in the process of completing those surveys. We do have our plan that includes what we've found so far, and we'll have more information when we do our annual update a year from now.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions from the public or like to speak to that issue? Council members, any of you have any comments or questions? We have discussed this, I believe, at our last meeting. If not, then we will close the public hearing and we will call the meeting to order, the regular council meeting to order tonight, June 21st, 2012. And if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will we bow? Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for the beautiful weather you've given us. We ask you that you be with us tonight and help us go throughout this agenda and accomplish great things for the city. We also ask that you be with everyone that's sick in our city and help them get better. And all these things we pray in your name. Amen.
I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. We've got some pretty good number of issues here we will be dealing with tonight on the agenda. So it could be how fast we go through certainly, but it could be an interesting evening to say the least, maybe. But I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda that we have.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Now, during our 10-minute public input period. Was there anyone who did not sign up that wanted to sign up for our 10-minute public input period? Okay. We have Mr. Nick Downs. Come right up, if you would, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm one of the 3 partners that's in the process of trying to open the brewery in downtown Canton at 170 North Street. I know that on the agenda you have the alcohol-food ratio, and I didn't know if you'd like our input now, or you'd rather wait, or...
Certainly, we'd like any input or any comments you'd like to make relative to that, and we might even have a question or two for you.
Okay. We would obviously be proponents of changing it from 60-40 to 50-50. It would help us significantly in the business model in order to be profitable much sooner. For us as a brew pub, brewing our own beer on site, the vast majority of our revenue will come from that aspect of the operation. We'll have food because we need to cover that aspect of the operation. So for us, in looking at where we open up the brewery, it's very relevant to us, this vote and how we will proceed from this point on. But we have done a little looking, and I know like Woodstock is the same as the state's 50-50, and there's essentially no difference in any trouble or whatever you might attribute that additional 10% to. We've not seen that anywhere. So I don't know if you have any questions for us or.
What, do you have any type of schedule at this time for moving this forward?
We would like to be open by the end of this calendar year. It's
You have a lot of work to do on that building, don't you?
Say again?
You have a lot of work to do on that
Yes,
building.
we do have a lot of, but we think that's probably just a 3-month process to build out. We've been in there with a number of architects and construction guys, and we're fairly certain that 3 months we can be open. We have all our paperwork ready to go to the feds, and then once it's approved federally, then we can go ahead and submit it to the state. And so we're still on track.
So you have to have a federal permit?
We have to have it's called a brewer's notice, right? And we have to do that federally, and then the state also has one. It's a tag-on, and we can't apply for that until after the federal one's approved.
Hey, do you have the site, is it pretty much tied up from your perspective?
Tied up, you mean?
Leased, is it under lease or anything at this point?
It's not under a written lease, we have a verbal agreement with the owner that he will save it for us. And to be honest with you, we've already spent a significant amount of money. When they put the water line in, we opted to have a 6-inch water line put in, and so we paid for that. So we do have
Already have some investment.
Sure.
You feel like you could meet the 50-50 without any problem?
No, we'll have to be cognizant of what our.
So it would be tied at 50-50?
It'll still be tied at 50-50.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Would there be any street seating or anything?
Nothing on the street. We do, the plan now is to have a deck off the back, but there'll be nothing on the street. There's really, with the parking there and the sidewalks are, even though they've been, the width has been increased, it's still not something we think we could go ahead. So everything will be contained from the front doors back.
Do we have any ordinance, anything about coming off the back?
The ordinance actually prefers that.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be where you have to come through the restaurant and to get to the outdoor seating.
Especially,
You still plan to have the morning coffee?
It's still part of being part of the evaluation, yes. It's, we need to crunch the numbers. One of the reasons the coffee is in there, I'll be honest with you, is just to offset some of this revenue.
Correct. It's a great idea.
anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let me say that we would look forward to your being here very much.
Go away.
Okay. Consent agenda, items to be to consider for the consent agenda. You have the minutes of of May 17 and June 7 in your package, as well as this is the approval of the ADA transition plan and resolution. I believe that's been moved, hasn't it, over to
That's what we just,
Yeah, well, we don't know what that plan is exactly, do we?
it was, and you're continuing with the CDBG.
Oh, I was thinking, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking about the CDBG plan, okay. And as well as the approval of the Georgia Power easement we mentioned last week regarding the, an easement request, which we have already expedited, and then to affirm that, for the Waleska Street, streetscape improvements. Okay. Does anyone have any amendments or anything to the minutes? I mean,
I just abstained from the June 7th for not having been here.
okay. All right. Do we have a motion that we approve the consent agenda?
That's motion.
Have a motion and a second, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion with the exception of Mr. Cummins' abstention on the June 7th minutes. That should be reflected. Okay. Under old business, discussion of fire services options. Councilman Cummins, please.
We've been beating around how to address our fire service coverage for a long time, and so I gave a lot of thought, and I decided that I'd like to motion, and the motion will read as follows. A motion that the city manager engage in discussion and negotiations with Jerry Cooper of Cherokee County as to the consolidation of the City of Canton Fire Department with Cherokee County Fire Services, culminating in an intergovernmental agreement to be brought before this council for discussion and possible adoption. The agreement for which the first draft has been created is to be finalized and presented to council at the August 2nd work session. The minimal terms for consolidation agreement are to include the following: construction of 2 fire stations, one located in the north and one in the east sections of Canton. The placement of 2 ambulances, one each, to be placed at 2 separate stations to be determined by Cherokee County. The absorption by Cherokee County of all Canton Fire Department personnel and equipment. Number 4, the charge by Cherokee County for all services to the City of Canton residents and businesses will be the same fire district tax rate as charged all other residents and businesses within Cherokee County. And 5, the eventual construction of a Cherokee training center that will provide continued training of all fire service personnel stationed in the City of Canton. That's the minimum, I think, as we go through in this intergovernmental agreement discussions and negotiations. It will come down to very fine points. That's my motion.
You heard the motion. Basically, it is that we asked the city manager to engage with the county to prepare an agreement that this board could then consider at one of its future meetings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or questions? Mr. Cummins?
The history behind the motion is as follows. We hired a consultant to specify what Canton needed to do to upgrade our fire services, which all of us have agreed are currently highly inadequate. He recommended a multitude of improvements, some of which we have begun to undertake. After the consultant's report, Mayor Hobgood formed the Fire Services Committee, which I had the honor to chair. The committee looked at the most viable options. We considered several options, from doing the just minimal amount of maintaining an ISO rating of 4 to the undertaking of a drastic but needed expansion of services and provide our residents with vastly improved public safety, which they need and deserve. Because the committee, absent Mr. Bryant's attendance, was unable to agree on any option other than doing the minimal to maintain an ISO rating of 4, that recommendation as a starting point was made to the full council. But during the course of the evaluation, the option that appeared to be the most cost-effective way to significantly increase our fire service coverage and improve public safety was to consolidate with the county fire department. Both Mr. Rush and Mr. Huffman have on multiple occasions expressed the dire need for an additional fire station in North Canton. Consolidation will allow both Mr. Rush and Mr. Huffman to inform their neighbors in Laurel Canyon and Great Sky area that they finally will get that promised station. This station can't be built by the city of Canton alone without significant cost impact on Canton taxpayers. Canton Marketplace, which is projected to grow significantly with the construction of Northside Hospital and supporting facilities, will also have a new fire station constructed. Again, the city of Canton can't do that without significant tax increases on its taxpayers. But passing this motion, Mr. Goodwin will be able to satisfy his request for fire services improvement in that area of the city. And Mr. Huffman, who has declared the expansion of the fire department an emergency and has been frustrated by the slow pace of decision-making by this body, will now be able, with his vote, solve a critical problem and prevent pushing it farther down the road. Mr. Bryan should also be pleased because this solution will satisfy two objectives he has promoted this year: the payment by seniors of their fair share for services received, and for consolidation of city and county functions wherever it made economic sense. And I, lastly, by making this motion, am able to fulfill the campaign promise to try and improve fire service coverage for the entire city. But the best news of this solution is that most Canton residents and businesses will experience little or no tax increase, but will have 2 new fire stations, 2 ambulance stations in the city, and eventually a countywide training center for the continued training of our fire service personnel. The cost for all this expansion to the average hardworking family taxpayer will be less than what Mr. Huffman got passed with the addition of 2 firefighters at the last meeting of this council. And Canton will have 2 new fully equipped fire stations, not just 2 firefighters. The negatives to the proposal are that seniors will have to pay for the expanded fire department services that they receive through the levy of a fire district tax on their county property tax bill. The average senior with a $200,000 home will incur a charge of about $250 a year. Mr. Rush has already indicated his willingness to consider a citywide fire tax district using the current 2.88 mills, but the revenue generated from that proposal, estimated at approximately $250,000, is sufficient only to pay for Mr. Huffman's 2 firefighters and maybe 2 additional firefighters more. It certainly will not pay for 2 stations, 2 ambulances, and extensive training that consolidation will provide. It is also possible that the city ISO rating could go to a 5 and the homeowner's insurance rates might go up. But that insurance cost would be less than the cost of a Big Mac meal every month to the average taxpayer. To those who question the capability of Cherokee County Fire Department, just go back to last month's major apartment fire. From what I understand, the city who was responsible for responding was able to field only 7 firefighters, while the county fielded 35. This sure demonstrates to me and any reasonable person that the county can deliver service when needed. I will be voting yes for this motion, even though that I calculate my own personal costs will increase by about $375 per year. But I was elected to make hard decisions, not push the decisions down the road. I will always vote for what is best for the citizens of Canton as a whole, and not what is just best for me or for a single minority group. I have no qualms about the Cherokee County ability to manage the fire services needed by the city of Canton. They already have proven to me their capability and professionalism. I am now asking each of my colleagues to put into action what they've been saying. Do not act differently from what you say to the public. Do not let your prior words, statements, and promises to be construed without substance. Do not let personal or special interests cloud your decision making. But more important, this is not a vote for consolidation. Your vote today is for a motion that only indicates that this appears to be the best solution for providing the needed fire services to our citizens and businesses, and we should pursue it expeditiously to arrive at agreement that benefits all Canton residents. As we know, the devil is in the details, and even though I strongly support consolidation at this time, the intergovernmental agreement must be very specific, affordable, and overwhelmingly be the best solution for all citizens of Canton. This motion only moves us forward. We will all have 2 months to specify what we require for services. The citizens of Canton will have 2 months in which to let us know what they prefer and require. All of us will have a chance to vote on the final intergovernmental agreement. If that agreement does not deliver what is promised, expected, and needed, and is not best for the citizens of Canton, any and all council members can vote against it. Mr. Huffman has declared, and all council members have agreed, that acting on our fire service improvement is an emergency that should be addressed. We now have 2 months during which all citizens and interested parties can contact any and all council members to express their opinions and viewpoints. But please don't come back in August without a decision to move forward or reasons why this is not the best solution without having another alternative. Let's show the citizens that we can make hard decisions and move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I appreciate Mr. Cummins' comments, I couldn't disagree more with his proposal. I don't see anything wrong with talking to Cherokee County, but I don't think we should go in that direction. I'm prepared to offer a counter motion after we finish with this one, in which we declare the city of Canton as a fire district. We deduct 2.88 mils from our property tax. We institute a 3.12 fire tax, the same as the county. In this way, we can get that extra money and give it to the city, still retain our ISO 4 rating, and when the county gets to ISO 4, maybe we can talk to them about merger if we still think it's valid. I don't think it's wise at this time, and under this proposal, with going on ISO 4, I know for a fact that my insurance on my home, which is more than $200,000 appraised value, would go up $70. I don't know what everybody else's will go up, but it would probably go up more than that. And also, we're not talking about if we merge the fire department with the county, we're giving up a couple of $1 million of property and equipment. Plus, no one has said anything about reducing the 2.88 mils from the Canton property tax. So therefore, the people will pay, in addition to the 2.88, they'll also pay the 312 fire service tax to the county, so it's going to cost a lot more. So I'm going to vote no against this one, and I'm going to try to get a fire district for the city, and we get the money.
Yeah. Mr. Beresford?
I do also have an opinion on this, and first of all, we're currently at an ISO rating of 4, the county's at a 5, and I did say in the statement in the newspaper that we would have reduced service, and that was based upon the fact that we're a 4 and they're a 5. On top of that, back when Mr. Cooper was city manager of Woodstock, he wrote about a 5-page epistle to the Woodstock Council saying that it is not a good idea to go to the county. And rereading through that, there's a lot of similarities. So now, all of a sudden, it looks like it might be a good idea. I would say we're a 4, they're a 5, and we should look at these additional opportunities. And I would really like to, have a motion on this, but I would really like to have this county discussion taken off. We had an agreement some months back that we were going to stay with our fire department, and everybody kind of nodded their head. It wasn't formal, but now it's come back up, and I think that some future date I'll make that motion again.
Mr. Mayor. Well, I got a few comments too, and I would like to move forward. As you know, in past meetings, I've been very passionate about that, and I thank the council for allowing us to take some many steps forward. But right now, we don't know what the ISO report's going to be back on the county, but that's due back relatively quick. Well, I'd say within the next 30, possibly 60 days. Is that reasonable to say?
That's what I understand, yes.
I'm not sure that we should start right now. And here I am. Every one of you guys know that I've just sent emails about stalling. And, and here I am. But it will take a great deal of time and effort, and we've already had some meetings with the county. I will agree with Mr. Beresford about the fact that there will be millions of dollars of equipment in brick and mortar that the city has paid for or in process of paying for that will immediately move over to be county assets if we did it this way. I would like to also say, this is just some comments. This is not saying Mr. Cummings' motion is bad or good. I'm just making some comments here. But at the same time, we as citizens of Canton are paying for ambulance services through the county. We already paid for that. And they should already have it staffed. Am I correct on that?
Paying for it, there's no requirement or anything that they be located, that they be based inside the city though.
But they should be, that should be done, and I would hope that the county would recognize the population and the density of what the city of Canton has. And if that could be another discussion, if we felt it was understaffed, that we should approach them to staff it appropriately. Whether we could force them to do so is another thing, but I think we have close enough relationship that if we put a convincing story that we should be able to resolve that. Lastly, there's a great deal of grant money available. And I was talking to the chief just recently about the amount of grant money for staffing, and that's one of the biggest or the largest costs. That there are grant monies that we can get to help us staff. And I'll say one last comment and I'll shut up, is that there are some other ways that we could combine and not necessarily have to build everything at once. If we built one and then a few years later build a second, and we don't have to do it all at one time where it's such a burden. And the last thing is there will be a tax increase for seniors if we did it that way, because they will start paying for service, which I support, by the way. I do believe they should be paying. I'm sorry to be so long, but thank you.
Mr. Beresford?
2 points. First point is on the ambulance. I don't think the ambulance program falls underneath the fire jurisdiction. I think it's a emergency vehicle. Could be wrong. And for them to guarantee that we'll have ambulances here because we have the fire department here is not necessarily true. I stand to be corrected. No problem. The other point is, yes, we did have 7 Canton Fire Department personnel on that fire down there at the department. They had 35. And I think that's an excellent joint effort by the county, stepping over and helping out the colleagues. And I think it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beresford. And I think Mr. Cummings as well. I think he's laid out the options reasonably well there. And I will say, though, that if you think $70 on a $200,000 house is a really big deal, wait till you see what your tax bill will be in 3 or 4 or 5 years from now if we don't do something else. And it's going to be heavy. It's going to be real heavy. At least we have to decide here, do we want to improve our fire service or do we want to maintain status quo? If you got, an ISO of 4 or an ISO of 5, if it costs you a whole lot of tax dollars to keep that ISO 4, a lot more than you save from your ISO 5, and you have improvements within the city by having additional fire stations, ambulances based in there, cross-trained firemen, all firemen be cross-trained EMTs, so a lot of us is getting older that may need somebody like that to arrive on the scene first could be important. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of discussion here. Now, this motion that has been made is not one that takes any action other than the fact that, I mean, it doesn't complete any transaction at all, really. It just says, let's put it together, come back. If this is something that you want to do, you vote for it. If you don't want to do it, you vote against it. I mean, you know, it's not consolidating with the county. It's not a vote to do that or not to do that. It's just an option, Mr. Huffman.
I would ask Mr. Cummins if he would consider having us discuss with this county after they get the ISO rating. Because if they get an ISO rating of 5 or better, I think that pretty much might kill the situation.
Mr. Cummins.
To answer that again, the difference between 4 and a 5 is, like Mr. Rush says, on his house is about $70. And I figured, you know, the average house is around 168,000 or something like that in the city. And I figured that was about the cost of a Big Mac meal, and that would not make a significant difference if you look at the additional services that we're getting in terms of 2 fire stations. And if I might add, I'm not really trying to push consolidation. I'm trying to push one thing here. We've got an issue with fire services in this city. We need to resolve that issue, and it requires hard decisions here. This appears, from what we did in the fire committee, to be the best option. I don't know that it is. And I think when we get down to going to the county, we really need to go in a spirit that we're negotiating something, and not in a spirit of just discussion, because we'll never get a finite definition from them what they'll actually give us. There's a lot of things in here, like, for example, I'd like a cancellation clause that we didn't even mention yet, that if we find after 2 years or 3 years this isn't working to our benefit. I'd like them to specify, for example, a staffing that they're going to put into each one of these fire stations. In other words, these are all the things. So all this motion does is basically gives us the strength of saying this appears to be the best way to go about it, and we'll go and in earnest negotiate with them. And if we don't come up with something that's satisfactory to the majority of us, then we're all going to vote against it. It's conceivable that we go there and the agreement that they come back with, I don't even like, and I would vote against it. I just feel that we can't sit here month after month and do nothing. And that's basically what we've done. And from what that committee came out, if you look at the economic numbers and at the increased level of service that we'd be getting, assuming that capabilities and everything are equal, it does point this to consolidation being the best. But again, the devil's in the details, and when we get down to looking at it, we may say we're a lot better. We may come up in that course of time with a totally out-of-the-box solution. I spoke to Mr. Wood about an idea that we might even conceivably look at, and that was what I called paid event volunteers, so that rather than incurring the cost of having a staff of 4 people every shift at 3 different fire stations, maybe we go back to having only 3 per shift, and we have these paid event volunteers that we can page on necessary events to come to fire services at a significantly lower cost. It's just, we need to do something.
Mr. Rush?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's only one thing I want to point out here, and we're in this fix largely because of bad management from City Hall. I mean, we've had a fire station designed for Laurel Canyon Great Sky since 2003. The SPLOST 6 was started in 2006, I believe, and they had a couple of $1 million in there for fire buildings or government buildings, and we didn't put it there. We put it somewhere else. So now we're talking about, well, we can't fix it. Let's give it away. I think that I agree with Mr. Huffman. We may have this discussion later, but let's get the county on an equal footing with us on ISO ratings. $70 may not seem like much to the mayor, but when I talked to one of my neighbors about raising his garbage pickup from $7.50 to $10, he said, well, you loan me $3. So, you know, it does mean something to everybody, so I'd like to call the question.
Roll call.
What was your,
Roll call vote, please.
all right, we have the motion and we have a second. Okay, we ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Beresford? No. Mr. Bryant?
No.
Mr. Hupkins?
I would like for Mr. Cummins to bring this up after we get the county report back. No.
Okay. Okay?
No?
Yes.
Okay. Motion fails 5-1.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to make a corollary motion. My motion would be that we, and this maybe require two motions, I'm not sure, but I'd like to make a motion that we create the city of Canton as a fire district. We reduce our property tax by 2.88 mils, and we institute a fire tax of 3.12, whatever exactly what the county rate is. And we initiate that with the beginning of the next fiscal year. And in this way, well, we'll discuss after there's a second.
We have a second on that? I have a motion and a second. All right, discussion. First, first let me say that type of motion would require a referendum, I believe, but in order to implement that and take that away, would it not?
We can do that, I think it
And you
would.
can take, in other words, you can make someone who's been paying taxes under that, fire taxes without a referendum, but it was given to them under a referendum. So can you take it away without a referendum?
I'm not sure I understand, who's paying it in the city of Canton?
Seniors are not paying it, right? And we want to implement just by resolution here, or?
Well, I'm not sure we can do it by resolution, it may be an ordinance required, but no, the city can create a fire district that encompasses the entire city limits and
Okay.
impose a tax within that fire district to provide fire services. Just, you know, without a referendum. But I'm not sure it can be done tonight by a vote. I think it could require an ordinance and further action.
Okay. Anyone else?
Have a question?
Yes.
For Mr. Rush, why not just match the reduction to the district tax? It was, I think I heard 2.88, 3.1.
If I may, well, the reasoning is that if we're considering going to the county has a 3.12, and we could just institute the same tax rate, reduce ours by 2.88, so the people are paying an incremental increase, but a lot of them are getting a reduction in their property tax. But it wouldn't be a great amount of money, but it would be the same money that we would be paying to the county were we to go with the merger there. So we get that money, we get it in the city of Canton, and we use it to augment our fire services.
So follow up, I'm understanding that under this proposal now, every property owner in the city would now pay for the fire services that they're receiving.
Correct.
This really does nothing other than make seniors pay. That's really all it does. It doesn't solve our problem and it improve our fire service. It may get a little bit more, but it's going to be there's only like 1,183 seniors that's getting this exemption, okay? So it's just going to be the tax dollars that they pay is going to make the difference. That's going to go a that's going to be a long way from meeting the needs of 2 fire stations and ultimately even more, as well as particularly the operational costs is just going to be, if Mr. Rush thinks $70 is a lot of money to him, he's going to think several $100 is a whole lot of money.
I just have a question. How much money are we talking about, approximate and increased revenue for the fire district?
Well, Mr. Ingram, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Bill. Mr. Cummins said.
I think it's approximately $250,000, more or less.
That sounds about right. That's what I was thinking.
It's about $250,000. And even if, while I have the floor, I might also state, even if we were to consider this, I'd say two things. Number one is I think we'd have to go through the ordinance process, as Mr. Dyer has mentioned. But number two, I think we should wait until and at which time the county establishes what their fire district rate. Because the only thing that we're really accomplishing by doing what Mr. Rush says is two things. Number one is we're getting our seniors used to paying for fire services at the same rate that the county does. And number two, we're generating an extra amount of revenue, which would be approximately $250,000, which, as we all know, is not going to add a fire station or pay for a fire station. So I would suggest that we delay on that motion also.
Well, I have a comment. I think the $250,000 actually would go, I mean, a new fire station is about $1 million, give or take, and, you know, a bond issue that would pay quite a bit towards a new fire station. It's probably something we should have done years ago, and everybody's now paying their fair share. And I want to remind everybody that just maybe 6 months ago, we did pass we voted to maintain our fire department here in the city. And I mean, we don't collect our own garbage now. We don't do our own water plant or sewer plant maintenance. We're talking about completely doing away with our water system. Now we're doing away with the fire department. What's going to be left? Parks, streets, and police. We're getting closer to not having a city anyway. So either we're going to have a city or we're not going to have a city.
I would like to comment that the $1 million fire station, that it also costs about $1 million to operate one, you know, a year or two. So, Jack.
Yeah, one thing I would mention that you all might remember is we already have $500,000 toward that fire station. It's been there for quite some time. So we're talking about now $250,000, we're talking $1 million, so we're $250,000 away. It's not, it's got to come up with another $1 million.
Mr. Mayor.
The cost of the station is the least amount. If it costs $1 million, you can roughly say on a bonded issue that that's going to cost you $6,000 a month. That's what it's going to cost you for the station. It's the staffing of the station, the training of the personnel and everything that really hits you on the budget. And you're right, we could, with that $250,000, pay for probably 2 stations in terms of a bonding. But we won't have any equipment in it, or won't have much equipment in it, and we won't have any personnel unless we increase the taxes.
Mr. Mayor, that's actually not true. And I'd like for the chief to verify this, but as I remember, it's about $500,000 a year to staff a fire station, and we already have the trucks. I mean, that $250 would go a long way.
Well, you know, we do have 2 stations down. It's costing us $2 million roughly to operate them. So, I mean, that's
the total cost.
Each.
Well,
let me clarify that. That $2 million includes administrative costs, which would not be incorporated into another department, another station. It includes the fire prevention budget, which would not be incorporated into. So the $2 million is not divided by 2, and the assumption that is a per station cost is an invalid assumption.
Mr. Huffman.
Well, I was going to echo a little bit about what Mr. Wood is saying, is that, first of all, when you hire, and this is what's going to happen with the 2 new firemen that will come on board here, is that those will be lower level, entry level firemen, qualified, but lower level. They will be hired at $35,500 plus $1.25 for benefits, so it's just a shade under $40,000. That's how we came up with the 80. So in a fire station, you have various levels of fire people in there, that many of them are seniors. One of the longest employees tenure is a fireman who has 30 years. And those incomes are up. So it skews the figure up to a higher figure than what you're going to be hiring in. So a $35,500 is a real figure. That
is what we're offering. And so I don't know.
I'm sorry. Well, I saw Mr. Huffman, when Mr. Goodman made a comment about the $500,000. I think he was referring to the $504,000 that is included in the SPLOST 6 sales tax program. And technically, we don't have that money in the bank, so to speak. That is in that SPLOST program to be collected as you go through the life of that program.
Mr. Cummings?
The only thing to come back to Mr. Huffman's figure of 35.5 and everything, the numbers that I have from Chief Floyd during the committee meetings, the fire service committee meeting, first of all, the cost currently of our firefighter budget is $78,000 per nose. And again, that's because of the longevity and everything. And when we went through in the committee, I specifically asked Chief Floyd, equip, train, benefits, salary, everything. And the number we agreed on in that committee was $65,000 per nose or per employee. So it's not $40,000. And Mr. Bryant, you're also correct. It's not $500,000, but it's about $625,000 because we are hiring lower level people rather than, you know, $700,000 or $1 million if we're just looking at a station with firefighters and equipment.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Ashford, what's next?
Thank you.
And I'll come back to you.
I also was on the committee, and we did have 6 options. Number 6 was the issue on the county. There was other options there, but I tell you what, the option that Mr. Rush has brought forward this evening has got a lot of merit. The problem is, and I don't want to get into that issue of pushing it a little bit, but I think the numbers are tumbled out here. I don't want us to make a decision just off of changing millage here, doing this up down. I would like for us to have this in the work session. I'd like for it to be presented as a formal type of program that we can build. If it's a ordinance or a resolution or whatever it is that we have to change or move ahead on, let's do that. And I don't want it to say stop tonight, but I don't think we have enough defined information that we really should have to be able to support it. I like it, don't get me wrong, but I think the other thing I would like to do is just say option 6 is out of here.
I would agree with Mr. Beresford on that. I'd like to clarify that my figure that I came up with also came from the chief, and they will be hired at 35.5. Much of the equipment is already there. They are already trained and will be on the job to put out fires when needed. So the figure is still a good figure. Now, the other thing as far as personnel, which is the biggest thing, and we talked about, I mentioned this just a minute ago, that we tend to pass over a little bit. There are grants out there that last for 5 years that help pay for fire people. Let's not forget this. There's grant money that can help us through these problems. We just got to go find it. And we already know what the name of the grants are. We talked about them a year or so ago. I remember I sat in the, out in the audience when it was talked about. Well, why not let's use that to help us through these difficulties? I think they pay something like, Chief mentioned that, I'll be corrected, that 25% the first year. You know, that's a good change.
I have a question about Mr. Bryant.
Bobby, do you know what we have to do, or there was some question of resolution, ordinance, or
I really hadn't thought about how to do it. I've been asked, can we do it without referendum? That's really all I've looked at.
Well, I'd like to comment too, Bob. I would support that. I think it's a good idea, but I do want to do it right. So I think we're probably not prepared housekeeping wise to do it tonight. So I would also suggest that we take it up at the work session and vote on it in the July meeting. So I would ask if Mr. Rush would
You have an
make
objection?
pull that.
Make a motion to table it till the July meeting.
Postpone to the July work session.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a motion, have a second. Is he withdrawing the motion?
Yeah.
No, because he's postponing the motion, so the motion stays on.
Okay. Is any other questions? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those no. All members opposed to the motion. The only question I was going to have is, why haven't we already got some of that grant money?
I have no idea.
Why hasn't that come to, if that comes to us and says, look, there's money here for us to hire more people, grant money, I think we would receive that very well. And we need to do that, especially.
Just ask our city manager to do some research and come back with
Bring that back.
bags full of money.
All right. All right, next item, discussion and action regarding senior services and benefits. Rush?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I originally brought this up, I was suggesting that we put together a committee of seniors and non-seniors to talk about various things. But since that time, I've concluded that there's not adequate support on the council for such a committee. Plus, in talking to one gentleman who I asked to serve on the committee, his comment was that he didn't want to be a fall guy on the committee for come up with recommendation to a council that would do nothing anyway. So I'm going to withdraw that part of it and go with Mr. Huffman and say that we better start making the decisions on our own.
Okay. You can withdraw, okay. Thank you. Well, I put on the discussion of voluntary senior exemption, and I think that this kind of follows in. You know, our senior exemption is a voluntary exemption. Anybody that, you have to come down to City Hall, you have to make an application for it. Now, it also says that if you feel very strongly as a city patriot that you want to give that up to help your city, then all you have to do is pick up the phone, call 770-704-1500, ask for Miss Linda Buchanan, who works the tax office, and tell her you want your name taken off of that list. 770, will you be the first?
I'm going to be out of town for a few days.
And I just want everyone to know, this is, you know, we're not making everybody pay this senior exemption. We're allowing them to. It's voluntary. They're volunteer to do this, to accept the exemption if they want it, or they don't have to take it. So, I am expecting a line come the next couple of days at that tax office of people coming to relinquish their senior exemption. And I will say this, I will personally, and pay for the cards myself, send a thank you note to anyone who comes in and gives up their senior exemption on their homestead exemption. So I just want you to know that, you know, this in essence would tend to solve that problem. If everybody has a senior exemption, we go ahead and give it up, you know, we wouldn't have to have this new ordinance or whatever. We'd have all that money. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take an impromptu poll. There's 7 of us on the council and 5 have it. I'll start off by saying when I'm 62, I'm going to be the first day to take that exemption, but is there anybody now that's willing to give theirs up?
Mr. Mayor,
Raised his hand.
well, no, that's the comment, because I'll tell you what, when I moved to Canton, I came here from Marietta, and in Marietta we had the senior tax exemption. When I got here, I filed for the county senior exemption. Didn't realize I had to file for the city, so I lived here 2 years paying the senior property tax. And when I found out about it, I was down at City Hall in a hurry. But I think I paid for my first year's salary.
I think this is very indicative of the fact that if you, in my opinion, if you have an election, you're going to have a hard time, overcoming or eliminating a everybody's gonna be a senior one day if you live long enough.
Mr.
You're
Mayor?
gonna be able to have that, hopefully, if you're a homeowner. Yes.
So I guess eventually nobody's gonna pay taxes. Nobody will pay property taxes because all the taxpayers will leave, because eventually everybody's gonna be a senior that lives here. But maybe we won't have a city anyway because we're consolidating and giving everything up.
Well, we haven't, you know, this has been implemented in the late 90s, and I don't believe anybody's been leaving, or many people have been leaving since that time.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, especially.
there is good news on the horizon. When will you get to that exemption age?
I will be, let's see, I'm 53, so 9 more years, but
Look forward to it.
yeah,
Big bucks is coming in here.
We'll
Couple
take
years.
the opportunity to just remind, I mean, my mathematical skills are not the greatest, but $400,000 3 years ago, $500,000 2 years ago, $600,000 last year has been lost to the senior exemption, and that's in a time of diminishing property values. I mean, I'm just kind of an old country boy from Auburn University, but, you know, War Eagle, but eventually, we ain't gonna have any money.
You do the best you can. What you got, what are you gonna spend? Anyone else?
Well, the only comment I'd make is that the senior exemption is a factor that draws people to the city and to the county. I mean, I know for a fact that many people, when they're looking to relocate, that's one of the first things they check out. And you know, for us moving from Cobb to Cherokee, we looked at the senior exemption for Cherokee, not realizing that Canton had one. But it does, a lot of the people particularly in the community that I live in, realize that was a factor. So it has a draw to bring people here, and just because they're not paying a lot of taxes, but everybody else in the whole area has the same similar tax. Ours is just a little higher than theirs.
In fact, we don't really have as much as the city of Woodstock also has. Every homeowner has a $5,000 exemption against their 40% assessment. We don't have that at all.
Mr. Mayor, I think that having the exemption for seniors is a fantastic program. And also, we've got to think about, and this will be coming to those who are younger than the majority of this council, is that once you reach this golden age, there's an income coming in. You're fixed. And as our big government continues to do, it's dwindling faster. So I think we are helping our seniors in their golden age, and I think that's what we should do. Now, I'm supporting this fire tax.
One real quick comment, and I'll shut up. I guess the other good news is, nobody on this council, we're all men of high integrity, there's no way anybody's gonna vote for a tax increase if they're exempt. Surely not. Surely not any of you guys will ever vote for a tax increase, because you're not paying any now, you're not gonna pay it if it increases. So, property taxes, correct, Mr. Mayor?
I think we all just said that we're in favor of a fire services district in the city or in the county or wherever it is. And if that isn't a tax that's gone to seniors, I don't know what you call it, Mr. Bryant. I mean, it lowers the general taxes, and if it's done on a revenue neutral basis, where I might tend to disagree with the method that Mr. Rush has, if it's done on a revenue neutral basis, it'll actually lower the taxes of other people, because now seniors will be contributing for that service that they receive. Now,
I think you missed my point.
I guess I did.
Yes, my point was that you're not gonna vote for a tax increase if you're not including yourself in that increase. By doing this the right way, by creating a fire district, we're all paying for what we get. So I think we are definitely all in agreement with that. And the fire district has nothing to do with seniors. It's a fire district tax on all property owners in the city of Canton.
Yes.
Great idea.
Mr. Rushton?
Anyone else? All right, so I will expect a long line at the tax department window, so you may want to bring in additional help.
We open on Saturday?
We will be if there's lines on. All right, discussion and approval of irrigation meter tap fees. Mr. Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought we had done this a while back. Apparently, we did not make an official vote, so it was never implemented. But at the time when we were talking about water rates and rebates on dual flush toilets and rebate on irrigation pressure regulators, I thought we also said we were going to reduce the fee for an irrigation meter. And the reasoning was, number one, I don't believe we should be making a profit on installing irrigation meters on our citizens. We're doing this as a service to allow them to save money on their sewer rates when they're watering their lawn, and therefore we should charge enough money to cover our costs and administration costs, but we shouldn't be out there gouging them and charging them double what it cost us. And the other thing too is, I think initially I was hoping we would install a pressure regulator with the meter, but I have since been advised that it might be a little more complicated than that, because that would be something the consumer would have to, if it went bad, they would come back to the city, and it's not a city product. So from that aspect, I think we should put something in there advising them of the rebate and suggesting that they'd save a lot of water if they put a pressure regulator on it. So I'm just suggesting we reduce the irrigation meter tap fee, and I don't remember the number. I think it was to $750, wasn't it?
You had 500 to 750, but 750 should be.
Yeah, 500. I think 550 was our cost, or somewhere in there.
180.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can speak.
550, 180 is our cost. Left administrative fees, so 750 should be our number we're going to be talking about tonight.
Correct.
Now, did you make a motion?
Oh, do we need a motion?
Yeah, I think so. Change the fee, yes.
Okay, then I'll make a motion, we reduce our irrigation meter fee to $750.
Plus.
Motion in a second.
Well, he wants to amend the motion.
No, I want you to put in the fee, the $25 pressure gauge rebate, whatever, for putting that in.
Well,
They put it in themselves, but
Yeah, well, the city has, we've instituted the rebate on the pressure regulator.
Okay.
We just, nobody's using it.
Stand corrected.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Cannon?
As long as I think, and I've discussed this with Mr. Wood, that basically the city's responsibility ends with the meter, and I think that should be made very clear that by giving a rebate or in any communications out, that it would be suggested to add a regulator, that it's at the individual's, homeowner's cost, and that the city's responsibility ends at that meter. And the other thing is as long as we're talking about the actual cost reduction, if our policy is to charge close to what it costs, I agree with the motion, but having talked with Nathan and Mr. Wood earlier, we are low compared to other communities that put these irrigation meters in, or tap fees. So we would be the low man on the block, but that's all right if that's our policy, to be as close as possible to cost.
Did we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Oh, okay. But then the other question is that, it doesn't matter if we're low on the irrigation meter, we're high on the water. So we kind of compensate for it, I guess. But I still believe that we really shouldn't be making a profit off of this, because we want to encourage people to install it so that they can save on the sewer costs.
Are we of the understanding now that the city's responsibility ends at the meter, even though we get a rebate on the intake?
Yes.
But all the city's responsibility, is that?
It always has.
We get a rebate on the toilet, and of course, that's in the house, so it's not unprecedented to get a rebate on something on the other side.
It always has been where the meter's located, that's the city's, and once it leaves that meter, it's the residents. So there's
Yes. The only other thing I would encourage, and I have mentioned this to the staff previously, is that we should educate the public as to what this really means, and the city engineer has put together a flow chart on how much you save with heads, how much water you reduce, because our water pressure at the street is in excess of 100 psi, and most systems are designed to work at 35 to 55 psi. So we're putting out a lot more water at 100 than we really need to. And so if we would educate the public as to what this would mean to them in savings, and it's better for their lawn anyway. So, but I think we really need to educate and not just put a little line on the water meter bill, because nobody reads it anyway.
Mr. Bryan?
Just a suggestion, maybe when a person comes in and purchases an irrigation meter, we as part of the process, they sign a simple document stating that they have received papers or documentation, and they understand that the city highly recommends a pressure reducing valve to save wear and tear on their system. And, just a simple one paragraph, so that somebody can't come back and say, your water pressure is blowing all our sprinkler heads off the yard. Well, you sign understanding that, that's going to happen if you don't put the pressure reducing valve.
Maybe that could be incorporated at just above where they sign for the application, and it wouldn't take a separate entity or anything, but it could be incorporated in there. I think it's a good idea. Ms. Cummins?
I think it should be very clear, because if we've got it on irrigation systems, the next thing we know is somebody is going to come in and say that we blew their toilet off the floor because of the pressure, or we busted a pipe in their house, or a hot water heater went, or something like that. And I don't think we've had any cases like that, have we, Mr. Wood, of anybody, making claims because of pressure into the house?
Mr. Mayor, I think the code requires a pressure regulator on the water system entering the house. So as the water enters your house, you have a pressure regulator somewhere along the line that modifies the pressure. So if you get 100 psi inside the house, you better change that regulator.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a code.
Okay, I think we have. Sorry, you have no comment?
We have a call question.
Okay.
750.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Okay. All righty, staff report on the villas at Riverstone application for city to accept private streets. Mr. West.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have prepared a report on start with the villas at Riverstone. Basically, we have conducted an inspection, myself and the Public Works Director. We've determined the villas at Riverstone, the streets are in great shape for their age. They're relatively neat. With a couple of minor problems we noticed was mainly the signage would have to be replaced. There was hardly no regulatory signage, which is slow, children at play, speed limit signs, that sort of thing. And the stop signs is really all we've got out there at the intersection. We'll probably have to be upgraded to ASHTO standards, which is not a big expense. then I'll go down through the list of our inspection items and just try to point out some of the other issues we see and give you a chance to ask any questions. As you know, Riverstone Terrace is the main roadway from Brown Art College Parkway to this subdivision. It is currently it's a private street as well. So that's something we're going to have to deal with, I believe. We have deeds proving that all of the businesses, the rest home, the medical complex, have easements along that from right side street. Not a big issue, just something I wanted to point out. Okay, the streets inside the villas are all contained within a 40-foot access and utility easement, as stated on the plat, which means you've got 24 feet of curb, back-to-back curb, with 8 feet strip behind each back curb. The villas, actually, they have a 5-foot sidewalk that's a foot off the back curb on each side. The water and sewer system they're not asking us to take that into consideration for acceptance. It's private, where it will remain private where it is currently private. There's a couple of suggestions regarding, they've got a yellow painted strip along their amenities area on the curb that we think should be left to be maintained by the HOA. That yellow paint, we don't feel like we should go out there and paint that yellow paint every year just because or by the pool. And then the only other consideration I see is some ADA non-compliant handicap ramps. That's really all I see just jumped out at.
And with the utility, the water remaining private, would we have to convey to them an easement for that to be there? On our property at that point? It'd be on our, if we take that, we'd take
Yeah, that, it may be as my understanding, calling it private is not legally accurate. It's behind the meter. There's a master meter because it's condominium. So yeah, if it's within that right of way, we would have to convey them some right to be there. I don't know where the water lines are. Are they within that right of way?
Yes, the mains are. The meters are going to be further off than that 8 feet behind the house. I mean, behind the curb. The meters will be on out into.
Isn't there a master meter?
Yes, but
they have individual meters we build internally.
Yes.
They have individual meters for each.
No, they pay. I think they
Pay one deal, I believe.
Right. I think isn't that correct? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's right.
No, they have individual meters.
Oh, they do?
Yes, they do.
But we don't build it individually. I'm just asking a question.
Those meters would be located where?
I have photos of some of them in the sidewalk in front of some of the residences, right before you get to the front porch. You know, they got little 4x4.
We would just have to grant an easement that just describes generally water line and meters. Because they're owned by the association. Because it's in common properties.
Describe. So there's one city water meter for the entire property, is that what I'm?
Yes. And then they probably get one master bill and read each meter to prorate each individual usage.
I'm sorry, go ahead. How is this different, and this may be more a legal question than an engineering question, but how is this different from a condominium community parking lot being accepted by the city? Right now, these are
Oh, it's condominium.
These are condominiums.
These are condominiums. Okay, so if, say, for example, how would this be different? Say, for example, Canterbury Ridge went condo, and then Canterbury Ridge asking us to accept all their driving area, their parking lot, driving area. How would this be different?
Well, from a legal point of view, the only issue there would just be they'll go anywhere else. I mean, if it connected to some other street, it would be like any other subdivision. The fact that it's a dead end, I mean, it would be the same as an apartment complex.
So it's the same.
Anywhere else it doesn't have a through street.
So it's the same. This doesn't have a through street, right?
No.
This is just this is a condominium community with really it's the streets now legally are a common driving and parking area. The residents can decide to do anything they want to. They can park on the streets or drive on the streets. It's theirs to do as they want to. I again am just concerned about beginning to set a precedent here. Do we really know everything we need to know? And then financially, I know we've been told that there's no funds in their reserve account for street maintenance. We were also told by another development that same thing, and then we were sent anonymous, but also a factual budget saying that there was funds in there, some $30-something thousand. Well, I'm not saying anybody trying to be deceptive, it's just the facts are there. So have we done any financial auditing to verify that there's actually not been money collected over the years for street maintenance that the city would be entitled to, take possession of if we take on the responsibility for managing their street and / parking lot? Do we know the answer to that question? Has there been a financial
There was
audit?
none indicated on the application where it specifically.
Yes.
Question, if the water system and sewer system is privately owned and something should fail in the future where they need to dig into it and they go into the street, who pays for fixing the street?
Well, in an emergency situation, if our system is down, we'll handle it just like any other emergency. Our crews will go in and repair the water line. Now, if they have a service line leak, if they have to get a plumber out, then the summer's going to go.
The reason I asked the question is we had an instance with a homeowner, or apartment, or rental owners a couple of years ago, I guess, where they had some sewage problems and the city went in to fix them because it was an emergency, and by the city going in to fix them, we claimed ownership. And so we're stuck with that for forever. And what I'm wondering is if we were to do what you just suggested, would we be in the same position because we've set that precedent already?
Well, I think this is a little exaggeration there as far as just going in and doing something. That particular case was an ongoing year after year after year after year of work orders being sent out and UP actually going out and doing the work. It wasn't just like a one-time deal. I mean, it was going on for years, and the fact that the city had at that point gone on the private property maybe and done work, put equipment and forces out there over those years, certainly our city attorney at that point said, that would indicate it was going to be ours. Sorry, yeah.
One question to clarify what you said, Joey. If there's an emergency, for example, in the middle of the night, water starts gushing up in the middle of the street, would be the same as if my service line to my home starts gushing up in the middle of the street. It would be the exact same thing. And I call the city, hey, I got a big giant water leak. Would the city really send a crew over there to?
I think they would work to protect their asset, the street. They'd have to do that.
They'll turn the water on.
First thing we're gonna do is
Yeah.
turn the meter off.
Well, yeah, of course, turn the water off, but would you go in there and repair my water? Of course not. You wouldn't. So it's the same thing. So the question is then, who pays to fix the street? The water line fails under there. What if there's some catastrophic failure where, like that polybutylene pipe we had several years ago, all the service lines begin to fail 10 years from now? Now the entire street's got to be dug up and repaved. It's a city taxpayer-owned street, but a privately owned water system underneath. I see a legal fight unless somebody can answer that question right now. I think we need more research before we approve this.
Mr. Dyer.
Well, it would be a legal fight because the city would take the position that they have to fix our street. If somebody else causes damages to the street, we expect them to fix it. For instance, if they have to dig up a sidewalk to fix a water line, their service line, we expect them to replace the sidewalk.
That's why I think it's a bad idea to have a private utility underneath a public street.
Well, except for,
Gotta have one or the other.
but it exists everywhere. You're talking about a bigger situation here, but at my office, I had a leak after the meter that went under the sidewalk. I had to fix the sidewalk.
Okay.
I mean, it happens.
Okay.
So that's a normal situation. Now, a road collapsing is a bigger repair than a little piece of sidewalk. And that would be a bigger deal, but the same thing would apply. We'd expect them to fix it.
I tend to agree with Mr. Bryan regarding I don't think it's a good idea actually to have a private utility located at all on public property like that. Although, particularly water and sewer or something like that. But I also think that there's a very likelihood ultimately that if they, well, I guess what I was trying to think is if they have individual meters, why don't we build them by those individual meters? Then their seniors can take advantage of that senior garbage rate.
I'll do a little bit of research to see what.
In fact, we adopted an ordinance that encourages, and new development all has to be individually metered. And so we would be encouraging that anyway, for water conservation. Now, they're paying their share apparently collectively, and so you're getting the conservation effect of it anyway, but.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion this time that we table this particular application until these questions and others that may come up can be answered.
Can I address one big question that Wes hadn't mentioned? One of our policy points was that we had to be able to get good title to the property. In a condominium situation, the road's actually owned by the individual unit owners. They all have a percentage ownership interest in the common area, which is the road. So you have a big logistical problem here, and that the deed dedicating us the road is going to be signed by every owner for us to actually keep good title.
I believe she's got all those except the two.
Two are in the process of going through a sale, and as soon as that sale is completed, we will have those signatures.
Yeah, but they're going to have to sign the dedication document. That's the application. So
Right.
assuming that everybody that told you it was okay will sign later, then we won't have a problem.
Yeah, no,
But
we understand that
Okay.
completely.
I just want to make sure, because that would be a huge logistical
No,
challenge.
Let me ask a question. Ms. Day, did you have other comments? If you did, what we'll do is we'll ask the council to allow you to speak. You have other things, I knew you had your hand up there a minute ago, so.
I do have.
Could we have a motion to allow her to?
So moved.
Motion to allow her to take second. And a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Okay.
Exactly where the lines are is put out with the construction engineering plan, which I have and I can share with the city. And the city inspectors, that was their obligation to follow through and see that it was done that way. The other thing I have is when you, we pay a meter rate based on the meter that's in the vault right at the entrance of our community. That, the rate on that is 10 times over what the average individual pays, because it was a master meter. And I understand that the city has changed that for the future, which was a very good move, but it didn't change things for us. We paid that rate. We do not get individual bills for every unit in there. We get more than one bill, but we don't have a bunch of individual meters. I don't have a water meter at my front doorstep. What I have is a shutoff, and that's how they're set up. The meters are strictly in the vaults. That's the only place the water meters are. And those vaults are right as Riverstone Terrace ends. On the left-hand side, there's two big openings, and Dean Floyd knows that. He's looked at our water situation. He's aware of what our hydrants are. He's aware of what our meters are. And we've also had work done by the same people that don't do the city work, so that we make sure that we have things that are done in a proper manner. Any question about easement accessibility at all? Mr. Dobbs knows the person that's purchasing for one home. There's no question that those people will sign. The other property that is up for sale and in process of closing right now is across the street from me. There's no reason to believe that that won't happen either, and we understand that we do have to have 100%. That's why we had all but 2 persons at this time, and the only reason we don't have that is because either one or the other is considered owner per se, because while you're in negotiation for a contract, you cannot sign off on something that's going to go to the next person. I've seen that happen, and I've seen that come back and bite them. So that's not going to happen that way. As far as what our bills and our meters and things are, your water department knows what our bills and our meters are. They can tell you that exactly. And as far as any of the construction and the location of the construction, I can give you, and I'm sure that you have it among your documents, and I'm sure Mr. Patton can find it, that where things are located, and Joey can confirm whether that location is true. Mark Crosby spent a lot of time on our property in the last several years that I've lived there and gone through some of the situations that we've had to go through. And we got a sign off from the city on the property to release the developer without enough information on what was being released according to what was expected to be done. So we're not looking for something for nothing. We do contribute. You won't find a community that spends more of their money locally than ours does. So, and as far as your fire tax is considered, these people would be glad to pay for the fire tax to have access to what they have access to now. That's a non-issue. So we need to take it for what it is, not what we perceive it to be, and back it up with the facts that back that up.
One thing, I'm sorry. Did y'all, as a community, did y'all have any contingency funds for roads, for sewer, for whatever?
We have a reserve, a small reserve fund that and it is not, we do not have anything designated.
It's just one big fund.
It's just one fund. And if we'd have a decent fund, if we hadn't had to go backwards and correct the things that we were left with because of poor inspections and poor choices by our developer, and the interaction between our developer and the developer above us, this Mr. Sasser sold the property to, not following the guidelines that were there. We spent a few $1,000s on attorney fees to settle out the detention pond, when really Mr. McCurry should have done it on the top side. We should never have been responsible for that.
Do y'all still collect fees for contingency?
We have a monthly fee for maintenance. Our maintenance right now is, we have landscape, we have exterior maintenance. That means the exterior of the units and the roof is covered by that. We are fee simple, so if something comes from the main line into our unit, that's our responsibility. If it's past that line, then that's the condominium's responsibility. But a lot of this has to do with understanding what a condominium is and the declarations that are out there and how they are provided for. We don't have street parking. We only have short-term parking. We are not equipped to have street parking, and it was never considered. The only reason we don't have wider streets right now is because somewhere along the line, the decision was made that the developer could increase the number of units that we have by doubling the row in that center circle instead of leaving it one. And had that been left alone, we would have all your easements and all your water things like you want.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question? Sure. How much money is currently in the reserve?
I can't tell you that figure because I don't know it, but I can get that figure for you.
Well, would you be, or do you think your folks would be willing to sign documentation stating that if the utilities underneath the streets fail for whatever reason, and you know the streets had to be dug up, that the association would pay to repair the streets if the cause was because of the utilities that the city had no control over. So that I would say that's a big hang-up of mine. If we could get that legal document that would satisfy everybody, then you know, I think we would be a lot closer to accepting this and at least overcome one of the hurdles that's come up. So that's why I made the motion that we postpone this until we have these T's crossed and I's dotted, because like I said last time, we better get this right, because whatever we do, it's going to set the pace from now on.
And I understand that completely, and we're not, you know, we didn't come into this as a slam dunk. We came into this as a learning curve, as all of you have come into this as a learning curve.
So would you take this take this and...
I can take it to the board. I would like it to be put in writing so that they understand exactly how you're stating it, so that I don't misrepresent it, but I can take it to the board.
So we understand is that in some of those fees, that if something should happen to that street, that, and we hope it never happens, of course, but if it did, then the street repair would be taken care of with that fund.
Right.
Okay.
I think that I don't know if we want Ms. Day to leave here with no earthly idea of what we want. I think that's a good point there. Another thing that I would ask, if there's any way that individual meters can be placed at those condos, and your association or whatever actually pay the deposit or the meter fees on there, and then those would be our utilities, assuming they've been reasonably constructed and there's nothing really wrong with them. That would eliminate the need for this if we could do that, and it would probably benefit the homeowner.
What we need to do is have an expenditure evaluation of what that entails.
Right.
So that we have figures to bring to people.
Mm-hmm.
We also can justify what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the advantages of it are. And there are advantages both ways. I'm the neighborhood salesperson. Okay? I tell them as much as I know, as truthfully as I know it, so that I don't misrepresent myself and I don't misrepresent our community, and we go into this with full faith that we are telling the truth.
Ms. Day, you do a great job.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rush. One comment, following up on your comment about installing individual city meters at each condominium. I think that we have a set fee for that, which was for new construction. It's probably pretty stiff. I don't know what it is, but I'm thinking if this subdivision we want to go that direction, that we should make some accommodation to them in that fee so that we're not stiffing them because they've been here a while and they're
Right. It's a little different ballgame here. It's not the usual.
It's not an original tap on.
Right.
So you might want to think about it that way. Tap on is for the introduction of service need, and that's already been historically established.
I would ask that Mr. Dyer like some sort of legal document that says that if the streets get a hole in it, that they understand that repair to be done because of the water.
If they get a hole in it.
And if it gets a hole in it because of pothole shows up some years later, then they'll take care of that issue. That's a fund. It's going to be set aside or whatever they want to do. But if you could put some sort of a legal deal so that we would have some of the members here comfortable with what needs to be done and not create a whole new issue. Because this is the first stab at trying to resolve the wrongs that were done prior to us even getting around here.
As I understood, what we're looking for is an indemnification that says if the street needs repair because of a failure of the private water system, they'd be responsible, not for just any general, and we take one otherwise.
But if we do what this other proposal is and
Wouldn't be necessary.
Then it won't be necessary.
accept the water system and they pay for individual meters, we don't have to worry about that.
I think we need to ask Joby if he would work with them and see how it's set up and what would be involved in the placement of meters there, and if it can be done, you know, and what the expense would be under our current system, and then the council can decide what relief we may want to
Mr. Mayor.
give. Yes.
That's bringing in plumbers to tap into those lines, to bring it, plus our tap feeds to set the meters. We're going to be talking an astronomical number for these good folk. And I think the first thing that Mr. Bryant threw out, have an agreement, let's do it that way, because I guarantee you, that's not going to be cheap, going back in, busting out sidewalks, putting in new lines, because if you only got a meter scattered throughout that entire complex.
No, you got.
I think there's individual meter boxes on several of the lots, but I wasn't aware that it only had a curb stop in the box. I can say the box is there, it could be replaced
With a meter.
pretty easily in most cases. Some of the ones I noticed I thought would be a problem are the ones that are encased in the concrete, some on the backside that are in that little stoop. You know the ones I'm talking about? That's a mess, and it's also, without trying to sound too negative, you can stand in those things.
Yeah, no,
Not awfully there, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That was something that never should have been allowed to be done in the first place.
I agree totally.
So, yeah, no, you had developers building by the seat of their pants without direction, without supervisors that were capable, without, if you didn't have a capable supervisor, they had to be sure they could speak the language of whoever the crew was and get that across, and be sure they were on site to supervise it. The past building in your boom time and the time that I've lived here didn't happen that way. I can't make excuses for it, you can't make excuses for it, it's done. But what we can do now is see what our choices are and see the most effective way to go forward and still be reasonable to everybody concerned.
Is there anything else specific that we want to make sure that is addressed before they come back? Like they ask our staff to do.
The only other comment I would make is that Mr. West indicated that the signage needed to be upgraded.
That's a good deal, we've already talked about that.
So that's been resolved in open.
Right.
I don't have any questions.
Are there cable lines, or is that, y'all have
We
central
have
cable?
we have cable lines, yes, but not it. We have cable lines that were put in when the development was done, but a lot of people don't even use those cable lines, we use other sources. But there are cable lines in, the cable lines are the cable business, you know, that's their problem. Yeah, and it's all underground.
Has Mr. West finished his report?
Almost, if we're going to talk about utilities, I'll bring up sanitary sewer cleanouts. We'll have to look, I mean, if we're going to maintain, as we do water, we maintain up to the meter. On sanitary sewer levels, if there's a blockage between the main and the cleanout, then we generally maintain to there. So I'm not sure about any sewer cleanouts either, where they're located or if they're.
I
something's going in that direction.
So I'll just look at that when we're
Sounds like
out
we're not
there.
really going in the direction I was taking over. One of
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, okay.
So I've not finished. Motion for Mr. Bryan, motion to table this.
That wasn't actually anything to table, it's just a report. There's no motion yet, there's nothing to table.
Well, I'll withdraw that. if
It's
we're
just a
not
staff
gonna
report.
All right, staff report on Pinnacle Place, application for the city to accept the private streets, Pinnacle Place.
Okay, Pinnacle Place, another one, the streets look good. What you got out here is a 30-foot access easement shown centered on the roadway. You've got two 12-foot sections of the roadway on either side of the center line, and then a 3-foot strip within that easement. Beyond that easement, a 10-foot utility easement that's on the individual lot owner's property. So, that's just to get you to know what their situation is now.
What was the 3 foot? What did you say that was?
That's the distance. If you get from the 30-foot, there's a 30-foot easement, and it's 15 feet centered on the center of the roadway. So you got 15 feet of easement, then you got 12 feet of asphalt and curb to get, combined.
Oh, okay.
That 3 feet is what property we're talking about taking over beyond the curb.
And that gets the utilities.
That does not get the utilities on, from that easement, from where their property line is at that point, they have, on the plat, they show another 10-foot utility easement on the outside of that. If you added both of those together, that would put you to the 50-foot minimum, which we require on any dedicated, a new subdivision.
But we wouldn't be taking 50 feet, we're only gonna they're only gonna take it 30 feet.
In this particular case, yes. Unless, or if you try to take the 10-foot utility easement, you're gonna be into getting little slivers of property off each lot, all the way around.
Do we don't already have that utility easement?
Yeah, the utility easement is in place.
The water lines are already in that 10 feet, and in my opinion, we already are responsible for the water lines.
I mean, they're our lines, right?
There's our water in them.
Okay.
So we're already maintaining the water line.
And the only other thing out there that seems to be lacking is the signage. Really, no regulatory signage. They have a decorative post that we wouldn't typically install. We want to leave that up to the homeowner association to bring that up to code, and then.
Would we typically install a street light that looked like what they have?
The street lights are always provided generally by the electric company, whether it be.
Well, they are now, but it wouldn't be if we took that over.
Well, no one's mentioned accepting any street lights. I mean, I don't know how that's actually gonna work, if Georgia Power would have to dedicate those to us, or, they got ownership of those poles.
Well, I imagine it would just be a matter of transferring that agreement to us if they're owned by them. Mr. Simple has, like to make a comment. Can the board entertain, have a motion?
Moved.
Motion and second. All right. All those in favor?
All I was going to say, Ms. Mayor has a document from Georgia Power allowing us we have a lease program with them. We will pay that off. We have a letter from Georgia Power stating that we can turn those streetlights over to the city after we've been accepted. We can't do it beforehand. We have to be accepted into the city, then we will pay them off and the lease, the lights will be transferred to the city. We have that letter if anyone needs to see.
That's one thing I wonder if they essentially conformed our standards. I would assume so, but a lot, so I don't guess that really matters since a lot of the other stuff didn't anyway, but, I would assume if we take those easements in, including the utility easements, the streetlights would necessarily go with that.
But we're not taking utility easement. The 10 feet, it will not be ours.
It's already out.
No, the pipes are ours. We are using the easement. They grant an easement for utilities to us, is essentially what happened.
Okay,
It's
does
done by
that
plan.
include streetlights?
It may, but if we're not maintaining the streetlights, they're not our streetlights. The water line's ours because it's our water.
So we're gonna have city streets there that have streetlights on them that the homeowners pay for. Now, that's been a problem that we had a long time ago. You know, it was a very inequitable type situation here. You know, some people live on public streets, the city pays for their streetlights. Some people live on private streets, they have to pay for the streetlights. There's something wrong with that picture.
This is the first time streetlights been mentioned in any conversation I've had, so I haven't really thought it through. But I don't know where the streetlights are. If they're within the 30 feet, then it's probably an issue you need to address.
We'd
They're not.
measure them off the back of the curb and see if they fall within that 3 feet.
Otherwise, it would just be a fairness argument that you're making of whether you want to take on the responsibility for maintaining them or not.
But we took them on in several other subdivisions
That's what I'm saying. It would
2
be-
years ago because, you know, where I live, you know, the city been having streetlights there. They may not have been pretty ones, you know, but the city been paying for their streetlights downtown and in some of the older subdivisions for years and years. And in the newer subdivisions, the city was assessing $3, $3.50, I guess it was, a month to each one of them on their water bill. Well, there's something wrong with that. Okay. So, I mean, somehow or another, we gotta make sure whatever we do is fair to everybody.
Yeah, I just like, there are still places where there's private streets where the residents are paying for the streetlights. They're owned by Georgia Power, but the residents are paying for them. And mine being an example, I live on a private street. And I pay for my streetlights. Once a month, I get a bill from Georgia Power. So they're still, and it seems like this might be a similar situation if the streetlights are not within the 30 feet that we're being asked to take over, then we don't have anything to do with those streetlights. They're not on our property. They're not owned by the city. There's no building involved. The streetlights are irrelevant to the city.
So that'd be true, but if they're in the easement, that's a different story, I think.
Are they in the easement?
The way, yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't be more than 13 feet off the back curb.
No, not the easement. The right of way that the city's gonna take over.
Are they within that 30 feet? Probably not.
The city's only gonna take over
We would have to measure those.
curb to curb plus 3 feet either way.
So I'm still confused here. If
Let me ask,
streetlights are
excuse
not
me.
within some easement that we already have, that's the reason we're not taking that over, because we already have the easement for the utilities there.
Mr. Mayor.
That's ours already, the easement. And if the streetlights are within that easement, the utilities.
No, it's not our easement, it's their easement. It's our pipes are underneath it, but they own the land.
We have to have an easement.
They gave us the permission to run the line.
That's
So
the easement.
it is our easement to that extent. Right now, Georgia Power is using the easement, presumably.
It's a blanket.
Use an easement.
Right, all I was saying was, it's not obvious that they become the city's responsibility. You can take it on, but if it's Georgia Power's line running through an easement that's been granted to them by the homeowners, it has nothing to do with us, unless we choose to have it to do with us.
Mr. Mayor,
Very true.
those streetlights will be paid for. They've been sitting out there all these many years. We're asking for the city street to become a city street versus private. And the streetlights light up at night, look good, and they're in excellent condition, and we're going to pay off the lease for them. What is the what's the issue of if the street light is 4 feet or 2 inches off, what's the issue? Who's going to come out and fix them? Georgia Power's going to come out and take care of it. That's who takes care of the city streets. And the city pays for the street lights. Remember, when half the city was paying nothing and the other half was paying $750, and we went through a long issue about, how do we get this straight? It was simplified. The city pays the electric bill for city lights. What's the issue?
Well, here's the issue. Who's paying it now? Who pays the Georgia Power bill for the streetlights?
Homeowner Association.
So is that going to stay the
Is this
same?
particular subdivision?
Will that stay the same?
Not if you take them in.
So now the taxpayers start paying for that. I mean,
We're paying for everybody else. So
paying for everybody else. But there's also, like, for example, on Main Street, there's some street lights broken that hadn't been fixed for years. Georgia Power hadn't come out and fixed those street lights. They're city-owned street lights.
Call them and give them the phone number.
Yeah, call. That's all it says, call and they'll come out and fix it. Make a note where it's
No,
at.
they're
They won't
not
have to
gonna
know.
fix these kind of lights. Those fancy lights on Main Street.
If I may.
Those are.
Okay, Becky would like to speak. We'll have a motion.
Yes.
Second. Okay.
All of our streetlights were marked on the plaques that you were given, and as far as I know, every streetlight is in the easements. For example, on my next door neighbor's house, the street light is not any further back than the person's water meter. So they are in the easements. They are leased by Georgia Power. This is a copy of the buy-down letter and our agreement to pay it off, if we can submit that. Any maintenance on these streetlights is done by Georgia Power. We just need to call them and they take care of it. They're the very same streetlights that are in the rest of River Green, on all the other River Green streets that are not private streets, and the city is currently paying for those streetlights. Very same fixture, no different. It's just that because we're a private street, we are paying the monthly electric bill on those. And for, as John said, for quite a while, we were even paying for the rest of the city until we realized we were paying double. But as I said, they're the very same lights.
Yeah, I think the question, one of the questions that I had there was, even in, let's say out in River Green where the city's paying for their street lights, okay? If one of those gets hit by an automobile and knocked down, what are we going to replace it with? One of the decorative ones like was there? Or are we going to go more like the city would do with a street sign? Got our old standard, it's on the pole and it lights up, it's a street light. I don't know the answer to
Since
that.
they belong to Georgia Power, if one of them gets hit, I don't know. What would Georgia Power replace that with?
I don't, do they actually does the pole there belong to Georgia Power?
Yes.
That's
what you're
these
buying.
lights on each thing out here belong to Georgia Power? So you mean they'll buy those decorative light?
You're leasing, that's what you're leasing is the poles. So when you pay them off, you're gonna own the poles, the homeowners association.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Now, we don't have
That's what
the
the lease agreement is
we
for.
don't have the decorative lighting like that is along River Green Avenue, that is at City Street. We don't have that kind of decorative lighting. I don't know how much different it is. I know it's same kind of lighting like is in Bridge Mill, is same that is in all the other sections of River Green. And as I said, I don't know what would happen with those.
Well,
Something
that's
happens
the
to
question that I have as far as the streetlights. What would the city replace one of those streetlights with? I know what they would replace one with on Cherokee Street, a telephone pole.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, you're
That's
paying for
not what
those
you
right
want.
now in all over River Green. So what do you think would happen with those lights you're paying for now? You're
That's the
already-
question. That's the question I have.
So we did like on Main Street, we put a orange barrel there and wouldn't have a light. That's the way it's been for about 3 years.
And that's what it's.
So, Mr. Mayor, I answered. So what's the big question about streetlights?
Well,
Let's move on with the program.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's an
Well,
update.
you just
Well,
want to worry about the road, not streetlights.
Well, let's be clear, what they're really, to sort of end it all, hopefully, is they're asking you to take them, and the choice is just take them or not. I mean, what the association is asking you to do is accept the dedication of the streetlights and the roads.
Yes,
The water lines, you don't have to, because you already have them. But
yes.
that's what the request is, streetlights and roads.
We want to be treated just like any other city street that will be taken in by.
That leads us off in all other vortexes. You're asking the city to accept responsibility for the streetlights, whatever that means.
Yes.
Whatever it means.
And we mean for that to
We don't know what that is, and they don't know
be,
what
and we mean for that to be as it is in the rest of River Green.
They're just saying, treat us like everybody else, whatever that is.
I think that I would like to move on with this process we're talking about. I think when we get after Mr. West's update on what they need to do out there, then we can say, because in this anonymous letter that was referred to earlier, that there's funds. So let's find out what they're offering. Let's move on with this program.
It's kind of,
Actually, I'd like to put this one to bed, and I'd like to motion that the Pinnacle Place streets be accepted by the city of Canton and be dedicated as city streets. I further move that the Pinnacle Place fund the city of Canton streets escrow account in the amount of $25,000 to be used exclusively for repairs and maintenance of the Pinnacle Place streets so accepted by the city, and that all other expenses such as legal expenses, plat revisions, acquisition of the lights will be borne by the Pinnacle Place HOA. That's my motion.
have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Question.
Yes.
Where did the 25, how did you come up with the $25,000 figure?
The actual thing in that balance sheet that was floated around was two different numbers that amounted to about $38,000. There has already been a amount of $25,000, from my understanding, paid to the city because of a sidewalk issue that was assessed to the developer who was unable to pay it, and the residents themselves paid that $25,000. So in essence, they've put $50,000 into the city's coffers relative to these funds.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, roll call vote, please.
Okay, roll call vote. All right.
Can I say something? His motion just mentioned roads.
Right.
We're talking about the power poles too, right?
Yes, sir, I'll add that, and the street lights.
And the signs.
Anything in the right of way or easement for utility? Okay, well, any other questions, discussion?
I have one question. Any lights, did you ever say?
You know, any lights you have?
There's 18.
How many?
18.
18. Roll call vote, okay, Mr. Cummins,
Yes?
Mr. Rush,
No.
Mr. Goodman,
Yeah.
Mr. Huffman,
Yes.
Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
and Mr. Beresford.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Okay. Next item on the agenda, discussion and approval, potential approval of Southview Cemetery rules and regulations and fees. Mr. Cummins.
Makes a
Mark,
motion.
excuse me, just there seems to be a question by my colleague that I voted for this. Now, it's my understanding of this personal gain that I will receive, but it includes over 100 residents. Therefore, it has not a thing to do with me gaining anything. And you cleared that up on a previous meeting when it came down to, and I forget what the issue was, but you cleared it up and you said, oh, I know what it was. It was about the seniors. that was brought up, and he was wanting to do something about the seniors, and you said no. The individual sitting in this chair can vote on what they wish, unless it's for me to receive from the city X amount of money. Therefore, it's ethical. Question I ask. If it is wrong, then I will sit back and wait for your...
As we discussed with the senior thing, is there's two different issues. One is ethics. That has nothing to do with your legal ability to vote or not vote. The only thing that governs your ability to vote is a state law that defines a conflict of interest, which is I don't remember the exact words, but it's financial interest, which has been defined to be a direct financial interest. And I don't think this is direct financial interest.
Thank you.
Because it affects everybody in the subdivision equally.
Mr. Mayor, I had the floor, I believe.
Sorry, go ahead. We got sidetracked there. Apologize.
Get on to some more morbid issues. We have this Southview Cemetery rules and regulations, and I'd like to make the motion that we adopt these rules and regulations.
Can I make a suggestion that also you need to establish the fees, and I think we've recommended 400 and 600 for city and non-city residents respectively.
My oversight and the fees as established.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We got a sidebar over there. Okay. Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion regarding the cemetery regulations? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. All right. Discussion and approval of wastewater plant design contract. Mr. Wood, you want to mention that?
I'll be glad to. We apprised council at the last meeting of the need to continue with the design of the wastewater plant. The price quoted for those services by Mr. Proctor's firm, I believe, is $334,000. The urgency is that plan needs to be submitted to the state EPD by December 1 of this year, so they obviously are anxious to keep that process moving. So depending on council's preference, the question is whether or not you want to take action to authorize that design contract for the wastewater plant. I believe there's been some discussion. I think Mr. Cummins made the suggestion that as a component of that design that consideration be given to upgrading so as to enable us to possibly achieve a greater processing quantity from EPD, and I think that that's being taken into account at the same time. But basically, we need authorization, if it's a pleasure of council, to approve that contract to continue those design services.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any other discussion or questions?
The only thing is to further that I talked to Mr. Troxler on this, that if the, and I can't even think of the word, I lost the word, but if the costs to expand the plant are significantly less while we're doing the process of the consent order itself, we should consider plant expansion if those costs are significantly less at this time versus having to expand at some future or near future time. Now, one of the things that we don't know is, or that hasn't been stated, we currently use in the plant about 2.2 million gallons a day. We're geared or permitted for 4 million gallons a day. But what might not be known to council and public is we have pre-sold approximately 650,000 gallons of capacity, meaning that we are at 2.9 roughly million gallons a day of reserved capacity, and if we go in now, and I think the original design, DDR report had a roughly 5.4 million cost estimate of what it's going to cost us to bring us in line with the consent order. And if we're going to borrow funds, we ought to consider expanding, at least considering the expansion beyond that 4 million, because when Northside comes on and when they add all of the facilities at Commerce Boulevard, I don't think, it'd probably be after my tenure in office, but I don't think my successor is going to want to turn around just as we finish the plant and want to have to borrow another 4 million if we can do it now with 2 million, say, for example.
Well, increased capacity is something we all know that needs to be done, and need to do it rather quickly. The Northside request, talking to Don, Hosfeld, thank you. It would probably take us 15 years to get up to the 750,000 gallons a day. So that's quite a ways off. The rest of it would be joining the 600,000 that we've pre-sold our individual homes, a lot of them. The way things are going right now, we're probably another 5 years off before that start really having an impact. Then if you look at the geographical areas of the city and what we service, there's not a great deal of space available to put in any type of plant that's going to have huge amounts of consumption. With that said, I would like to say that we do need to consider what Mr. Cummins said, is to try to increase it a little bit. And here again, the CDBG matrix that Mr. Patton's working on, right down at the very bottom, water and sewer improvement, flood drainage improvements, solid waste disposal improvements. There's some more money. And I just think we should consider using these type of monies, once again, using some of the areas that we can help us out during these difficult times. Thank you.
Just one last point is that it's basically not committing to do it, but estimating what it would cost to do it now versus later, so that we would have something in order to make that decision. And the word I was looking for later is incremental. If the incremental costs now are small, then it would behoove us to do it rather than spending significant funds later.
We have a motion on the full motion to second. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. All right, discussion of defined benefit plans. Mr. Beresford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we change the vendors from the GMA to One America administrators, and Judy Ross would be our program manager. All this does is move us from GMA over to a new management group, One America. It does not impact the defined benefits plan, and we will be looking at a savings roughly $7,000 to $8,000 in administrative fees by making this change.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Mayor, the only question I would have is to Mr. Wood, and is what is staff recommending? Are they in approving?
Well, I was listening appropriately to Mr. Beresford's recommendation. I did not know if, because I think staff is comfortable, and I have a meeting at 8:30 tomorrow with a number of key staff leadership. As you can imagine, rumors are running rampant out there, and I do want to curtail a lot of the inaccurate information that's out there. But the plan that as I understood it in my simple lay terms, was that we would discontinue allowing introduction of incoming employees to the DB plan, but we would maintain the life of the DB plan for current employees until those employees are completely out of the system, retired or left, whatever. We would introduce new employees into a DC plan. The particulars of it, I guess, are to be established, identified, and that we would give current employees the opportunities of staying either in the DB track or pulling out of DB and going into DC, or a third option might be pull out of DB and then just be paid a lump sum. Those were the options as I understood them, and I don't know if you want to present.
No, sir. Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
The only thing we need to do tonight is to agree that we will go from GMA over to the One America. The points that you're bringing forward is for discussion later, and it's important for the employees to know and understand that nothing will happen to their program if they desire nothing to happen. They are locked, they're frozen in, they can do what they want. All we're going to do is look at additional options. But, as you mentioned the first part, with a new employee coming in, we have not reached that yet. So that will have to be established. And then the rest of the program is just to be set. So all we're looking at is change vendor.
Okay, then in response to Mr. Rush's question, I think under the concept or terms that I just outlined, I think it's what we will be fully comfortable.
I would, let me suggest, wouldn't we really want to vote on a written contract as to what we were actually doing at that time? I mean, right now, it's just sort of, don't you think you need to read exactly what it says?
Mr. Mayor, actually, we probably need to have the agreement. I concur with the change of vendor. There's no question in my mind that's good for two reasons. One of which has already been mentioned, the administrative savings, but the second is that GMA is a pool of cities, and what is transpiring now, from what I understand, is the stronger cities, one of which is Canton, in terms of having the benefits covered, are departing from the pool, and by us going to a different vendor, we will be handled individually, and what we decide to do as a council relative to that pension benefit is the contributions and everything will be based on strength. But again, for us just to vote to go, I think we should have some document. I do agree that we should be saying, here's the contract from One America, and we should be approving that rather than just the concept of going, I think.
Mr. Mayor, just a question of curiosity. This proposal was made a year ago. And I just wonder why, I wasn't around, but I did sit out in the audience during one presentation. Does any of the council, the mayor, Mr. Wood, remember why we didn't do it a year ago? Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Beresford, that's got that.
I distinctly remember. I made a motion, it was not seconded. Therefore, no discussion, nothing happened.
Good answer, good answer.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Any other, we have a motion and a second, so, I mean, are we just approving the concept, or what are we doing with this? I guess would be my question. We don't have anything to look at, actually. Theoretically, I guess.
It's a service that's going to be offered. I will make a statement again. The motion is to change vendors from the GMA to One America administrators and and Judy Ross to be our program manager. That's my motion.
And what, with no effective date or anything, or is that tonight? Is that effective tonight?
I
I don't know anything about what's involved, or we talking about money's moving on?
I
Are we
don't,
pulling out of the GMA plan and going into somewhere
Yes.
else?
Yeah.
There's gonna be a packet of paper like that to do that.
and they made that perfectly clear today, that we have to give them the okay to go forward, and they've
This
got,
is
they've
just
got a lot
going to
of work.
bring us a proposal is all this is
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
Okay. Does everybody understand that?
I think
Besides me?
I think we're saying that we want to proceed with them to bring us the packet of paper, whatever that packet is in the agreement, and that at that point at which time we receive it, that we would then vote on its acceptance. Is that fair enough?
I don't think so. Right now, what we want is just a contract that we move in the vendor. The details of what it's going to be from this point forward for the employees will come later. After Ms. Ross takes over, then they will make the recommendations, and we will approve or disapprove whatever their recommendations.
But there's gonna be, just to have them manage your fund, I mean, the documents we have with GMA are, we're constantly amending them, they're gonna have the same kind of documents. So, I mean, I think they're probably telling you, we don't even want to prepare the papers unless you vote. Because it's a lot of work. So I thought, you are just saying, we intend to do it, but you're gonna vote again. I mean,
That's correct. And we're going to, I'm giving you just a rough estimate, I want to say $8,000 savings, based off of what GMA is currently charging us.
$8,000 a year?
The administrative fee for GMA is almost $18,000 a year for them to do what they do. And what they do is basically charge our account to be an 8% return each year, and the city guarantees that 8%. Right now, we're in arrears or unfunded by about $2.5 billion, that if every employee decides to quit tomorrow, we're going to cough up $2.5 million because of what they have set up for us. And what Mr. Cummings was pointing out, the pool of cities is getting smaller by the minute because the program that they're running is not ideal. It puts the control of a program into our hands. Right now, we have no control over it other than shelling out the money. And it's important that we
don't have control over the investment.
We have, what we do is send in money each year. I call the question.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry.
One final. I tend to agree with you, and I like the proposal, don't get me wrong, I agree with everybody, we should change the vendor, but I think we need something in writing that we know what we're agreeing to. Right now, it's kind of a nebulous, mystical figure. If we can get a contract saying, this is what it's going to cost you annually, then we can vote on it. And we can declare our intent to change vendors, and we probably will change vendors, but I think we need something in writing before we agree.
Mr. Bryant?
We're not gonna sign anything tonight. We're voting, I'm trying to understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong, John. We're voting for Judy Ross and her people to bring us the contract to change vendors.
That's it.
That's it. We don't have to sign it. It's got to be gone through by the legal department and whatever. So based on that, I'm in favor of the motion, and let's get on with it.
And it would still need to be voted on again to be adopted.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
That's fine.
Let's vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Open records policy and procedure. Mr. Cummings, you would
Yes.
comment on that?
I have worked with Susan on this, and as you know, I held it up before because we had the question of whether or not the individual departments should be authorized to release records or whether it should go through a central point. And I more or less left it up to Susan to come up with the best policy that works with her and doesn't
Mr. Governor,
impede.
you want to go ahead, you want to make a motion first? Then we'll
I'd make a
discuss it?
motion, we accept the, I'm sorry.
Second.
Motion and a second. All right, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but go ahead.
But anyway, it's been worked out with Susan, and I think we have one that is very workable and got the language in it at this point in time.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Okay. Discussion of community development. Community development block grant and possible approval of resolution endorsing the project. Mr.
I'll be
I'm
brief.
sorry. Was that you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
presented y'all the development block grant project opportunity at the last meeting to make some suggestions, and Mr. Patton tells me as of today that no suggestions have been forthcoming. One that he did offer is the application would be to support some of the funding that is to be 100% city funding for the improvements of Marietta Road from John Pettit to Railroad and East Marietta. That is a suggestion. If anybody has any others, but the main thing is he's got to get that application into the county by the end of this month.
I believe, I'm sorry.
I want to go back to water, our improvement of our wastewater. It's right there, all fire department.
Well, I think, and I'm not sure whether those, what you have to do, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Patton, these things have to be applied to certain areas. In other words, like low income areas particularly. Is that not right?
No, they do have to apply low and moderate income. It may be, my experience, Mr. Huffman, has been in the running of water lines or upgrading of inadequate water lines in low and moderate income areas as opposed to improvements to a centralized plant. I'm not sure that would qualify.
Understand.
Yeah, they kind of picky on some of these things like that. They look pretty good on the surface, but then you get down to it, all the red tape you got to go through and all the requirements and regs, specifications, it ends up, you can't do everything you want to do. Yeah, Mr. Bishop.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we accept this resolution 2012 with the addition of Marietta Road being included into that is recommended by.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Not.
Excuse me, one thing, he said 2012 and I'm reading 2013.
It is a 2013 application. We are awaiting a 2012 approval contract for another project from the county.
2013 then.
Okay. Motion and second. Any other discussion? Not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Very quickly, under item 10, new business discussion and preparation for centennial event regarding the, Canton and the Confederacy, I guess. I spoke briefly with Richard Knight, the gentleman that was here last meeting, I guess, and he will help us. I would hope to be able to select a number of citizens that and perhaps council people who could work with that in order to celebrate that event and hopefully our plan for it. And I think we need to include all the various agencies like the Main Street and the DDA and others, Canton Tourism and all, to see if they can become involved. And I just wanted to announce that hopefully in the near future, if you or any others want to volunteer to work and participate in that event, I can see that being a several month long type event where events would occur throughout that year perhaps. Mr. Bishop, you volunteer?
No. Mr. Mayor, I would like to offer up my colleague and good friend, Councilman Bill Bryant, Rebel, for heading up this program.
I will decline that.
I can see where it could be fun and very interesting and very educational as well to have some of those events. So I just want to mention we will be working on that. The other thing that I just wanted to mention here is the discussion of a master plan for Heritage Park. I think, and I want this to go through the next work session in July so that we can really talk about planning Heritage Park. We don't have to put everything in there at one time, but we need to plan what we want in there. And what we really need to do is authorize at that point maybe our city manager to engage the services of a landscape architect or some firm that could plan that entire park, and understanding the connection between that park and the Etowah River Park. And hopefully, get it planned out. You never get where you're going if you don't know where you're going. That's for sure. If you don't have a plan of some sort. And I think that if we could lay that out there, and you could really sell it over the years, fill in as you can. Do the best you can. We don't have a lot of money for recreation stuff, honestly, but still, whatever we can put in there over the next years, but at least we'll have a map of what we really want to achieve there and what we want to see happen. So I just mentioned in that, Jack.
I think that's an excellent idea, but also I think we really need to consider the events that we already have there. And bring in people like Dave and Jimmy and his crew. They know what we're already dealing with. And just bring in somebody to design it, they don't necessarily know all the ins and outs that we already have. Looks like the barbecue event is pretty big, so it's going to continue so far.
Yeah, well, I tend to agree with you. I would hope that,
Would be great.
I would hope that the planner would consider all aspects of that, what's already there, and how to even make it better perhaps. But anyway, we'll talk about it at the next work session. City manager's report.
I will be purposely brief, Mr. Mayor, considering the hour. Water and sewer operator interviews have been concluded as of early this week. Basically, we consumed Monday and Tuesday. 4-person staff, well, 3-person staff panel, and fourth, including Mr. Troxler, have been going through those in a refined approach. The mayor, Mr. Cummins, at the mayor's request, Mr. Cummins was also part of the initial review panel, and as was I. And then what we have done has been to ask 3 staff persons, West, Canton, and Batavian, to work with Mr. Troxler in evaluating and rating each of those 3 proposals. We had good in-depth interviews, some of them 3.5 hours or so of each. I think one of the longest was, but we gave everybody due and fair and equal hearing, and I think we'll come out with an improved operating contract regardless of which of those 3 firms is selected. Our goal is to be able to make a recommendation to City Council at the next work session, and hopefully to have final action so that a contract can be awarded at the final meeting in July. One point of consideration in saying that is, once you make a decision, tentatively, hopefully make a decision at the work session, because what we're going to need you to meet our transition schedule, if a transition becomes the end result of this process. To meet that transition schedule, we really need you to take action on a contract at the second meeting in July. So we hope whatever direction you give us as we're coming out of the work session will result in a contract for the last meeting in July. Hospital has approached us about the possibility of converting, it's referred to, I believe, as the West Lake Tower. Mayor, you and I were talking about the identity of it. It is a water tower that is not in service in our system. Our last two main line breaks have severely disabled the hospital in terms of being able to continue to function during those hours that we have been out of water service as a result of those mainline disruptions. The hospital has approached us about the possibility of basically having that tower dedicated to them, so to speak. It's probably going to require over $100,000 in improvements to get it back online. The hospital has tentatively agreed to pay 100% of those costs. Probably it would come to us in the form of a 4-year contract, because the way that tank would be returned to the system would not be a one-time single rehabilitation, but would be a series of over 4 years rehabilitation. The hospital has tentatively agreed to pay all of that. The mayor suggested, which I thought was a good suggestion, that since the hospital is owned by the Fulton County Hospital Authority, it might ease the process if we simply enter into an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Fulton County Hospital Authority. I've talked to Mr. Hosfeld about that concept. He was certainly receptive to it, and is working on from a legal standpoint making that happen. There's also been some discussion about the hospital engaging an engineer to be sure that whatever the design, including running a new line or upgrading a new line, that would be at their expense and will go to the hospital directly, to be sure that all those engineering particulars are given proper attention, and the hospital would pay for that full cost. And once we have that plan refined and developed, we'll bring it back to you, but I did want you to know that discussion being underway. Final thing is budget. It's that great time we all look forward to once a year, and it's time to work on budgets. Mr. Ingram has already spent a lot of work and a lot of time, and I've spent a little work and little time. I want to be very, very quick to give him all the credit, but we're bringing a draft together. Mr. Cummins has stepped forward and volunteered to look at that with us and refine it, which I appreciate it. Certainly if there's somebody else who wants to do the same thing in an informal way, we would equally welcome that. But the main thing is we need to keep the process moving to meet our schedule, required codified schedule. And so we're hopeful that week after next that the mayor can accommodate a special call work session. Those of you who are veterans on council know we've done that in the past, usually in a couple of work sessions here in this room, but not during special work sessions. And so we'll be asking the mayor to schedule that hopefully week after next. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Are those proposed budgets available?
Well, they're not proposed yet, no.
So what is Mr. Cummings going to be looking at?
He volunteered to help us as we, in some drafting of the agenda. But again, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who wants to do that is welcome to. He had made that offer, which I certainly appreciate.
Well, my question, I guess, is before we have a work session, I would like to have a budget in my hand so that I could go through it and then come to the work session and be knowledgeable of what I'm looking at. So that's what, I guess.
Well, I think that's reasonable, certainly.
So
that product has not been produced yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when it is and it's available, then you tell the mayor, and the mayor then will say, I'll set it at a work session, hopefully a week or so after that, so that we have time to look at that.
That's not a few days to do that.
Because you know me, 101 math.
Thank you. Okay, council introduced item, discussion of alcohol ordinance, food to alcohol ratio. Mr. Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to make a motion that we direct Mr. Dyer to prepare the an amendment to the alcohol ordinance changing the food to alcohol ratio from 60/40 to 50/50.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? No discussion? I'd like to say something myself about that. I think that, we need to do everything we can to expedite, business downtown, particularly so. And the proposed, brew pub that would be located on North Street would be, I think, a real addition to downtown. I think also that, we may want to think, once he has prepared this and we would be voting on it, I guess we'd be discussing it in the work session in July and then voting on it at the third Thursday. We may want to give some thought to maybe making this basically effective just in the CBD district, downtown, for instance, which would be a little bit of incentive to be downtown, or it may be citywide. Right now we're at 60/40. Okay. Mr. Wood, would you agree that we have vendors or businesses here that are not meeting the 60/40 requirement?
I would not agree, no, I would not agree that I'm aware of any. Now, oddly enough, I asked the question yesterday of Ms. Buchanan if we were, in fact, getting those reports on a timely basis, and she told me that she did not have any at this point that had not been submitted on a timely basis. Now, whether or not, my follow-up question to her was, how do we know how accurate they really are? And the only way you can do that, of course, is going to be to commission an audit, which we would have the authority to do, I'm sure. But if you phrase your question, do I suspect there's some who might be doing what they need to do to meet those reporting guidelines? I would say I have that suspicion, but I can't confirm that.
But we're not getting any reports now, nor have we, like in recent months or last year or so, that are in violation of that. None of them are actually reporting that. That's correct. Okay. I guess
reports is what I was questioning.
I guess my interest in that, something I think we ought to really discuss at this meeting, is some of the other cities are 50/50. There's no doubt about that. Well, I guess maybe all of them. But here's the thing. Do we want to settle? Do we want to follow suit and settle for what others are, or do we want to go one step further? Do we want to go to 40/60 and have advantage of our people downtown over every other city in town? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I believe state law is 50/50, so we can't go to 40/60. I don't think.
Let's get a clarification on that.
No, the only state law defines a restaurant, an eating establishment, as at least 50/50. But the only place in state law where there's actually a requirement is on Sunday sales.
Okay.
A brew pub is actually defined as having to have 50/50, at least 50 as well by definition. So there's two things, brew pub and Sunday sales. But for a general consumption, you don't have to have a food requirement at all.
Mr. Beresford.
If the state had not made those stipulations, I would have voted for the 0. But being it is required, I'm saying it's a 50/50. And also, I would like for Mr. Rush to restate your motion, because I don't think it included any things that were just discussed. I think it's for...
The motion was for Mr. Dyer to prepare an amendment to the alcohol ordinance to change the food to alcohol ratio from 60/40 to 50/50. That's all the motion.
Yeah, and it's correct. The comments that I made have just been thrown out because this will be going before the work session in July, and it's some things I think we need to talk about.
Wait a minute. It's late and I'm confused. he makes a motion for us to say we're going to go 50/50. What does the work session have to
The
do?
motion was not that. The motion was for him to prepare the documentation.
It's a change in ordinance.
Okay.
Change the ordinance,
Then-
we need two
then fine,
readings.
let's do
We
it.
still have to vote
Call
to
the
do that.
question.
We'll do that in July.
Okay.
Sorry,
So
July.
I just did have that one comment. I had not thought of breaking it up by district. I think that's a fantastic idea that we need to think about, is maybe making it a little bit different for downtown. What would you say?
Well, we'd have to think about whether we can do that.
Yeah.
It's an idea to explore, but I'm not, I don't know.
You don't know whether we can do that?
I don't know. I want to give that some thought.
I think you can zone establishments in, can't you?
Yeah, but you would be saying establishments within this area, maybe you can, I just,
You think of that?
I don't want to take off running and say we can and then come in July and say. we
Between
can't.
now and the work session, think.
One more quick question. I'd like to propose next time too, if we carry on past 8 o'clock, we have to buy pizza and beer for everybody to stay.
I'll drink that.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a comment. I'm glad you brought it up because I wasn't going to say a word about it. I've had numerous citizens email, phone calls, and eyeballing me saying, since when does this council work by the clock? If there is business to be done in this council meeting, so be it, and we're not going to run out of here at 8 o'clock because somebody's got to get down the road and have a brewski or whatever it is. We have city business to take care of, period. And I did take great exception to that.
Well, that's a very nice thing to say, John, but Mr. Mayor, Mr. John. But also, we all kind of wander after a couple of hours. I think if we were to maybe prepare a little bit ahead of time, nobody's out of here. It's almost 9 o'clock. We don't be here till 9 o'clock. But I think we could be a little more responsible and respectful of the taxpayers' time and everybody's time. You know, I don't think other cities go this long. We don't have to go this long. We can do something a little bit better, but I don't appreciate this pontification about how long it is. Let's just get it done.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
The question's been called.
Okay, those in favor, Mr. Rush's motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Under the mayor's report, this gentleman couldn't be here, but I wanted to nominate an individual to serve. First, before I do that, I want to introduce somebody before we move any further. Lane Wood, would you stand up, please? This young lady here is the one who has been in charge of the Canton Community, Victory Garden East, the community garden. I don't know how many of you have been up there and looked at that in recent times, or at all. But you need to go up and look. I mean, it is beautiful, and she's been in charge of that, and she's worked really, really hard in doing that. In fact, my intention was to nominate her for a particular slot that's going to be coming up in the near future, but that didn't materialize. I'm going to let you know that tonight. So, but just hang on. We need her enthusiasm and her interest in working with this city, and I can tell you, she's gung ho. You don't leave any garbage up there. You don't do anything, out of line at all at that garden. It's a beautiful garden, quite honestly. It really is, and there's still some space available. If any of you need grow some tomatoes or whatever, and each one of these is like 4 feet by 15 feet roughly. 12. And they're half full of soil already, and you can put whatever improvements you want in there. Plant you some turnip greens for the fall or whatever, and it's like $15 a year. And you've got water there. The city is, I don't know if we send them a bill or not. They think they are. They think they're getting a bill. Send them a bill. And you got water right there, water hoses, so water the plants in the garden right close to your where you need them. So it's really, really great. And I want to personally thank her. You want to say anything?
I do, I want to help with the park.
You want to help with the park?
Yep. I want
Okay.
to come to that work session. I got some ideas for you.
All right.
All right, that's all.
We welcome those ideas, and hopefully we will see you there then. All right, the two appointments I'd like to make nominations for is for the Stormwater Advisory Board. Mr. Green, I believe Joel Green actually stepped down from that. I guess everyone got a nomination. These are annual things anyway, or they serve, it's annual appointments, or they serve until they've been replaced or resign or whatever. Steve Badgett, who lives here in Canton, he normally comes with Mr. Gramley that day, but he was sick tonight. So I would like to nominate him to serve in the place of Joel Green, who we appreciate did a great job on the Stormwater Advisory Board.
Move to accept the nomination.
Have a motion, a second, any other? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The other one is, I wanted to nominate Leon Gramlin to serve on the Planning and Zoning Committee. He would be replacing and serving the unexpired term of Mark Walker, who resigned. And that would be a term ending in December the 31st of 2015.
Move to accept the nomination.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Leon, would you stand up so everybody knows who you are? And all the public, if you have anything to zone or anything like that, if you're anything like us.
I'm the man. Thank you.
Yes, pretty much downtown, right downtown Canton.
To beat the 9 o'clock time, I move to adjourn.
Wait a minute, I'm not quite Second. You were not recognized. You weren't recognized. One of the things that we do need to discuss is the letter from the Cobb Marietta Water Authority. And you know, there was certainly some, at least in the media, and not in the letter, but in the media, there was some indication that they had an interest in going to arbitration regarding the SCADA system. They also had indicated that in my letter that you know, that maybe I was not correct in what the Board of Managers could do, and that maybe they didn't need the council and the mayor to, I guess, approve everything. But they're asking for us to approve that SCADA system. Now, I think that I would like to ask our city attorney to discuss what arbitration actually means. The bottom line here is this: we have made a very, very simple request. The request is that that we be allowed to negotiate and discuss and maybe reach an agreement with Cherokee County Water and Sewer Authority regarding the reservoir, with the guarantee from them that they will not invoke their first right of refusal if we should reach an agreement. Very simple. Why would anybody not do that? Okay. Why would anybody not do that? I don't know. But they have chosen not to do that at this point. Now, several years ago, in '06, the city bent over backwards for Cobb Marietta Water. We gave up the right that would really correct what's going on right now, our situation. The city gave up in August of 2006. In a meeting of August the 17th, 2006, the minutes reflect consideration to delete Article 4, Section 402 of the Hickory Log Creek Reservoir Contract with Cobb Marietta Water and Sewer Authority. What Section 402 did would have allowed the city of Canton to relinquish or give up some or all of its capacity to them at an established rate price, which was the price that you paid for it, that you put into it, plus 5.75% interest from the time that you did whatever it was that expenditure was. So that provision was in there. And then, for some reason, the city of Canton has relinquished that right, gave it up, and deleted that section 402 from the joint agreement between Canton and Cobb. I mean, that is an amazing thing that they gave up to them. And yet, we're only asking for them just very narrow request here that Cherokee Water and Sewer Authority, we be allowed to negotiate, perhaps reach an agreement with them without interference or without the pressure or the burden of them knowing that if we should reach an agreement with them, Cobb could come right in and take it out because they have first right of refusal. That's all we're asking. The Cobb Marietta Water Board actually hired an appraiser to tell them what our portion would be worth. Okay. Well, when it came back, the appraiser or Cobb has basically said, okay, with that portion Canton has really is not worth anything to you right now. Okay, because we don't know what the Corps of Engineers is going to let us do or take from Lake Allatoona. That has to be made before we can see any value for the city of Canton. Okay. Well, they're telling us our portion has no value now, yet they will not allow us the flexibility of seeking out the value that we believe we already have in it. It's kind of it's a real, and it's such a simple matter to me that I don't understand why they would not allow us the freedom to go out, free from that first right of refusal, and try to make the most and gain the most value we can for our city. So, you know, I just, and yet now they you know, we keep pouring money in this thing, and we can't do anything with it right now.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry.
In reference to the article in the newspaper, I was shocked to find out that the plans for the SCADA system had been worked on for the past 2 years, and it got real close back in, I think it was April. And as of this date, myself have not seen any item listed, the SCADA proposal, plan, what it entails. And I do not want to fall back into the situation we did when we built the reservoir that was only going to cost $30 million, and it ends up costing $100 million because of change orders. I don't want to see a SCADA program come in here and they're going to say we need some shutters or some weirs or whatever, and then lo and behold, 6 months from now it comes back and says we need another $50,000 to change the change order. And I'm sorry I'm pontificating.
That's right. Well, you know, I guess the indication in the
Let me just correct one thing, and that is the SCADA system was included under the capital budget last year. I think everybody got a copy of this breakdown, which included the breakdown of the land acquisition and various other things, but the SCADA system was identified as a second item on that breakdown last year.
The city of Canton has 50% of the decision-making capability in this joint partnership, which would include approval of plans like for reservoir offices and other expenditures. And it's obvious that they believe, as I'm assuming others do as well, that we have the authority to approve or disapprove these projects. And if depending on the money. Certainly, we have, I think, that ability. And yet, the articles seem to indicate, and believe me, I don't always put 100% stock in articles, but indicated that they would consider going to arbitration. And I'm glad, I'd like to ask our city attorney to discuss what that means for us, and whether or not it would be in our best interest maybe for that to happen, and or not, whether it would be other avenues available. Let me say this to you. There is and there will be an ongoing discussion, hopefully, with Cobb area. The last thing we want to do is a big furor and all that. But don't get me wrong. I mean, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. That's what we'll be. But, I mean, fairness is fairness. And something's just not going on right here, exactly. But, we want to work out some compromise if we can. I know we have things that they would like, and certainly we would like to be able for them to give up that first right of refusal. There is no logical reason that I can see that they would not. No logical reason at all. So it appears to be somewhat punitive right now. I mean, I don't know any other thing you'd call that. But, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
As you're well aware, you sent out an MOU last year in August, and after coming on board, we got into the question, or after I came on board, I got into the question of why we never received a response to that. And at some point in time, you appointed a reservoir committee, which Mr. Beresford headed up, but under his guidance, I managed to pull off a meeting, and I had us all get together, Cobb County, Marietta Water Authority, and us, and we met. And the first question I think that came out was from Mr. Beresford, was why we never got a response to that MOU. And I don't know who said it, but his answer was contemptuous and arrogant beyond belief. He says, that is your answer. And at that point, I felt that we left the meeting with some basis of granting your request for us to negotiating with Cherokee County, because we specifically identified them, and lo and behold, not only did we get, we're not going to give you the first right of refusal, which you've mentioned, but the letter that came back had another arrogant response in it, in my mind, that said, even if you do get an offer, because of our position, we won't even adhere to the 60 days that's within the agreement to consider that offer. It just doesn't look like they're at all wanting to work with us in trying to negotiate or come to some reasonable conclusion on anything.
Well, we're going to continue to try to do that, and I would like, I'm trying to get around here, Bobby, if you really kind of explain, if you haven't given up yet, go ahead, where we are there.
Well, the agreement had some terms dealing with how to resolve disputes when you're 50-50. Obviously, there's got to be some process for resolving it. It's a little bit inconsistent in that it in some places it talks about going to court and getting all the remedies you get in court, but it does have an arbitration provision. It's pretty long, and it states that it's there because everybody knows it's going to be a long-term contract and that there's going to be disputes and things might have to be changed. What's interesting about the arbitration provision is it gives the arbitrators power to reform the contract. Meaning you could go to an arbitration and say, this isn't working anymore. We need to change this term, and presumably the arbitrators would be able to decide that. It calls for a panel of arbitrators, 3, each side picking one, and then the 2 arbitrators picking a third. So it is there to resolve all kinds of disputes, not just monetary ones.
Are you saying that the arbitrator could change the agreement, like it's 50-50, they could come back and say, well, fairness, it should be 75-25? They could.
The language would indicate that. I don't think that's what would happen. I think you could stop that from happening, but yeah, it says they can equitably reform the contract. Yeah.
Equitably, and instead of they on 75, we on 25, it would seem logical that a 75-25 on decision-making would be equitable.
Yeah, but I mean, I would challenge it to say you can't change that basic. And I think we could, of course, stop that, but yeah, the language is pretty broad, because it needed to be. Because it should have said equity reform, except that you can't change that part. But for instance, the way it would come is this issue about the SCADA. It's in the budget. There's some terms in there saying the managers can implement the budget. So they would argue that it's already been approved. But the managers don't have the ability to enter into contracts. So if you have to enter into a contract, it has to come back for approval. You're stalemated. They could go to arbitration and say to the arbitrators, this isn't working anymore. If it's in the budget, it should have, we need to change the contract and say, if the budget's been approved, the managers can just do it. And the arbitrators presumably have that power to do that.
Question, would they not also, the arbitrators, have the ability to say that the removal of clause 402 was without consideration and should be reinstituted?
Yes. The arbitrators would also have the power to take away their right of first refusal. I mean, if they can reform the contract, they can reform any purchase.
So in essence, if we were to fight on that basis, we might have $20-some million to gain as our share of the reservoir that we gave away for nothing.
Mr. Brown.
One quick comment, go home. It's time to quit spending money on this thing. Nobody really knows what it's worth. Let's stop. Let's hold fast right where we are. Let's go to arbitration if that's what they want to do. Let's settle out this paragraph 402. I'd like to know why it was given away. I'd like to know the history of that. I'm asking, all the people are still living who did it. They all still live in Canton. News media, ask them, why did they give that away? Let's quit spending money on this boondoggle. Stop it now till we get some answers. Let's go to arbitration.
I pulled those minutes from the meeting where it was deleted, and I have asked Bill. What's that?
I'm sorry, you said
deleted. Yeah, that section. Yeah, 402. I'm sorry. And actually have asked Bill to see if she could find a recording of that. I'd like to know what discussion went on. The minutes reflect absolutely no discussion. They actually say Mayor Pruitt is asking for some consideration by the council to delete Article 4, Section 402 of the Hickory Log Creek Reservoir contract with Cobb Marietta Water and Sewer Authority. Councilmember Buchanan made a motion to approve the deletion of the Article 4, Section 402, and have Mayor Pruitt execute all the paperwork for the amendment to the contract. Motion seconded by Councilmember Wilson, 6-0. Okay. 6-0. No discussion. What's that? I'm sorry.
Back in the days of 15-minute council meetings.
Yeah, you don't like those. You love that.
See what happens?
I think, hopefully if we could find the recording, we can see if there was any discussion. My guess is there probably wasn't, that had already been discussed at a different time and place. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up to you. I know that wasn't on the agenda, but we got that letter, and I wanted to make sure to share that with you and welcome any feedback that you may have. Any other? I think that's it.
So one last question. Mr. Mayor, what action are you planning on taking from this point forward? Are we
Well, we are, let me say this, I have asked that I have asked our city attorney to contact and have a conversation with their attorney and see if there is a way that we can reach a compromise with this situation. And hopefully there will be, and I know he has attempted to make contact so far. I don't think you've got with just yet. Oh, that's right, they have a meeting scheduled. to at least discuss this and see if there's something, because, you know, we both want to bid a bit. We don't want to be a bad partner to somebody, but we won't be run over either. Period. Anything else? Mr. Bearsford.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, second? Okay. All those in favor?
Mr. Bryan, if you take into consideration the meeting length, all of the...
So where's your